Hash Church season 12, episode 18. Yeah, we're pumping them along here. Thanks for everyone for showing up today as you do on the regular. I appreciate that. I'm going to set up a quick little shout out to our sponsors because what would we be? What would we be without our sponsors? All right. All right. We're just going to I have 9. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So we'll just shut that and we'll shut that. Okay, is right. So I think I shut that off. Yeah, I had a bunch of, no, I did not. This is crazy. I gotta find the YouTube. Ah, there's the other one. Hiding behind. See you, YouTube. I see you. Shut you down. Bye-bye. All right, sorry, that was hard to listen to myself. We got a cool show for you today. I had 0 planned, and a bunch of stuff kind of fell together. So we'll see how that goes. First and foremost, I want to shout out my sponsors for being such awesome sponsors. Shout out to the Press Club. We'll start with these guys because, well, they're fucking awesome. You can elevate your solventless game at Hash Church with the Press Club's premium lineup of raw extraction essentials. Whoops. Proudly supporting our community through top-tier tools that make clean, potent concentrates a breeze. From their legendary rosin bags with proprietary pink stitch, that's how you know it's theirs, and 0 blowout guarantee, that's killer. For unbeatable durability and yield to award-winning wash bags, premium parchment paper, pre-press molds, and the innovative Press Club rosin press for precise heat and pressure control. Whether you're crafting at home or scaling up, their ISO swab stations and collection plates keep your setup spotless and efficient, all crafted with 100% food-grade dye-free nylon for contaminant-free results that preserve those precious terpenes and volatile organic compounds. You can join the Press Club in championing Hash Church by heading over to the pressclub.ca today and gear up for your next epic press. I would check out their spoon as well. I was using it the other day. I love the spoon. It's massive. I was actually not using it for bubble hash. I was using it to scoop dry sift out. And so it worked really wonderful. Shout out to the Press Club. You guys are awesome. And they're right over my shoulder here all the time. So they're right there. Even when they're not there, they're there. You know, you can elevate your session at Hash Church with Puffco's cutting edge lineup. Well, I'm going to puff all of them today. I'll start with the innovative pivot. You know what? Maybe I will have my first rip today on the pivot. A pocket-sized dab pen that delivers the full rig experience on the go, featuring a quick release 3D chamber for premium flavor and real-time temperature control with 4 heat presets and haptic feedback. Group rips, we'll dive into something a little bit bigger and more substantial, which is the Puffco Peak Pro. Powered by the revolutionary 3D XL bowl technology that offers almost 80% larger chamber for 2x more vapor, even heating from the sides to really blast out that material and get it into your lungs. An XL joystick for fuller loads with less reclaim, and don't miss the new Proxy, the modular portable powerhouse with 4 precision heat settings, fast 90-minute charging, boost mode for intense hits, and easy disassembly for seamless cleaning. Perfect really for any adventure. You can support Puffco's game-changing innovations by heading over to www.puffco.com or following Puffco at Puffco on Instagram today. Well, where would we be without the bubble bags? We do stand out as the premier choice for water extraction. It's no surprise why. We are the original innovators. We set the standard for quality and performance. Crafted with durability in mind, our bags come with a lifetime warranty, ensuring you're covered for years of consistent use. Our team behind bubble bags takes pride in our pioneering legacy, backing every product with unwavering confidence and commitment to excellence, making us the trusted go-to for enthusiasts and professionals alike seeking top-tier hash extraction results. Please check us out over at www.bubblebag.com. Everything's been slashed. I think we cut everything by about 50% some time ago. And if you use Hash Church 10, you can still get the discount. I lost my photo for Grandmaster LED, which really sucks, but I want to shout those guys out as well. This company was founded by Thomas Gibson with one mission in mind: build the most advanced lighting systems possible for growers who demand true top shelf results. With a deep understanding of plant biology, light intensity, spectrum control, really the whole 9 yards. Oh, where did I go there? Spectrum control. I totally went and looked somewhere else. Grandmaster LEDs has become a trusted name for cultivators chasing elite quality, and these aren't just lights. They're precision tool designed for those who care about terpene expression, resin production, structure, yield, and consistency. Every fixture is built with focus, purpose, and relentless dedication. That is Thomas to a T. Really to helping growers unlock their full potential of their genetics. And if your goal is to grow louder flower, frostier resin, and premium grade harvests, Grandmaster LED is built for the mission. On Hash Church, we salute companies pushing the craft forward, and Grandmaster LED is doing exactly that. You can head on over to grandmasterleds.com or .ca, and you can use HashChurch10 as a code to get a discount of 10%. So there we go. Shouted out the sponsors. Perfect time for Matthew the Sync Angel to pop to chat. How you doing today, Matthew? Oh, he's not quite
I'm
there.
doing well.
Oh, you're quick. You're quick. I asked you a question. You were muted and you had your camera off and you're like, oh shit, click, click. Nice to see you, buddy.
I was listening to your video, but I had paused it already, so it gave me a bit of a delay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I also, when I start the video, there's a delay and then I start hearing myself talk. So today I literally had to find the hidden YouTube page that was open with the mic unmuted with my own voice, on a 5-second delay coming through my ears. So yeah, there's
That's
that. Good to
very,
see you.
very disrupting. No, good to see you as well. What was the question? How am I doing?
Yeah, just how you're doing. So Matthew and I are in a science group today that was set up. I believe my friend Stefan set that up. So I met Stefan in Switzerland back in 2001 or two, and had an amazing adventure with him. And it wasn't until I met Ruben Valenveras over in Barcelona just a couple of years ago now, at the Spanibus, the last Spanibus that was ever going to be in Barcelona, unfortunately. And so he brought me into that group, and then I realized it was Stefan and all these other great people. So really cool to see you in that group. That's a solid group of science-based miscreants.
Yeah, I've come to find that to be the case.
It's awesome. It's nice to have these conversations going. I don't click on as many of the links, but when I see people like you in there pumping and actually posting something that's not just, necessarily about sharing a link, which I think is a great way to open conversation, but I also like the idea of hearing people share specific, because Stefan is the link master. I think we could agree
Oh
in that.
yes.
I didn't even know you could find that many links on Cannabis on a daily basis. It's insane.
I mean, it used to be that we would say we have no one's talking about it, so I guess don't complain about a full plate, right? But at the same time, yeah, I do like to hear people's impressions about what it is that they find interesting about said thing, certainly.
Absolutely. So how have you been? It's been a while since last we spoke.
I've been all right. The reason why I know Stefan is because one of the things I did recently was I went to EU, and I traveled all up and down the Romania in Brasov and Sibiu and Bucharest and all those other places. And I checked out the mountains and Dracula's castle and
Nice.
um, big old salt mine and places like this. Very interesting. I met some people, even competed in a small poker tournament in Bucharest and didn't win, of course. Um, and then I went and I saw in Eindhoven, Netherlands. I went to the Inexo Acceleration Day, which is where I
Okay.
met Stefan.
Okay.
And yeah, so I was seeing the no veg or extremely low veg plants, however those are articulated, and that whole thing. And I
Did you go
did
meet Dom?
did meet. I've known Dominique, yeah.
Yeah, great. But that's where you were at Dom's place?
Yes, I was at
Yeah.
his experimental greenhouse location, yeah,
Awesome.
where he decided to have the event, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. That is definitely a place that I'll be checking out in the future years for sure. He put the invite out to me last time I saw him. And I love what those guys are doing. I love the idea of having these very specific sort of, R&D cannabis rooms for so many different things, from feed validations to spectrums to, all of it, like just
Yeah.
IPM. there's so much important work that needs to be done, and I love the idea of having a place or places like that in the future that are able to offer that to companies, because I don't really think some cannabis companies understand like the level of value that that can offer you, where you're just like, you're doing the white papers, you're doing the scientific work before you decide to toss $10 million in and build this giant facility.
Yeah, absolutely. Or like, like the bugbear for me is like resistance and like how you quantify that in plants, which we talked a lot about, I think, last time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just feel like it's for one, we don't have all of the information anyways. It's nascent, but also yeah, man, if you're gonna spend like $1 million on seeds or cuttings or whatever, to get your production, if someone says that they're resistant to something and then they're not, there's not even recourse for you. You just lose potentially, or you're just at, or if you're relying on it more than other factors, then that can be a big deal for people. And also for
Mm-hmm.
the home grower too, I see people, they might feel like the plants they got were resistant or they were claimed some way, and then they think, oh, it's my fault. I did bad, when
Right.
it was maybe the plants instead. So I don't like that either,
Yeah,
personally.
absolutely. There's all sorts of different ways that you can help growers, obviously being an IPM and a bug specialist. Have you ever leaned into the idea of kind of helping, like, who would know better than the bug guy which cultivars are the most resistant to bugs? And Skunkman Sam, and I'm having a brain fart right now, but there's another word. It's not just about resistance, right? There's
Well, like
another.
in what context,
Well, in
Like,
the
do you mean like
context
the
of
word
like
like
how well a
tolerance or?
plant, yeah, like tolerance, like there's resistance, and then, but it's not tolerance. There was another word that he brought up one day that was like, look, there's two ways of looking at IPM. You want to get plants that obviously aren't susceptibility.
Okay, yeah.
Resistance and susceptibility and how they aren't the same thing. And I just think like you could hold a real big value as you travel throughout and you find cultivars that have those, in regards to powdery mildews or whatever, different levels of bug infestations. That would be a high value for people who are building facilities and buying out, ready to purchase their cultivars. Are you ever able to help with your consulting in that sort of sense, where obviously you have all this bug knowledge, but are you also tying it to the knowledge that you're gaining as you do more scientific cannabis work, that, yeah, I saw this plant and it just didn't seem to be affected in any way by such and such? Do you are you starting to build that repertoire in your background?
Yeah, a little bit. It's because like in because I worked in other crops too. So in that case, definitely. In cannabis, there's a lot to be unpacked still, I feel like. And um for another thing, like a big part of like resistance standards or susceptibility or tolerance, however we sort of enunciate that, however we define these terms, like, a lot of these are always going to have some sort of limitation, usually. Sometimes you even have trade-offs, right? So like in the cannabis space, you wouldn't necessarily want a plant that's resistant if it meant that it doesn't smell the way that you want it to, doesn't grow the way that you want it to. So a big part of it is pyramiding different kinds of resistance traits uh, that are going to be useful, but then also understanding where those limitations are. So then the other things that you can do besides sweet genetics, is to sort of increase that advantage and support it. So like maybe you have a plant that has a very special resistance gene, well, there's examples where like plants will lose a gene, like the MLO genes in cannabis and many other plants. And when they lose some of those genes, two things happen. One, powdery mildew cannot uh, infect the plant under most circumstances because the plant lacks a response that's a predictable, reliable response to the movement of pressure on the plant cell that allows it to then like enter in and not have a problem. On the other hand, mycorrhizae and other beneficial fungi and bacteria can't interact and communicate with the plant either. So for scientists knew this for a long time, and they were like, well, why didn't these genes, why didn't they get basically eked out? Because, they give susceptibility to powdery mildew and perhaps some other fungi too. The reason is because being able to beneficially, mutualistically interact with those fungi, those bacteria that are beneficial, outstripped the susceptibility to powdery mildew. So, like in a natural context, it's very complicated. Um, it's really hard to be like simple, and people I think oversimplify this interaction quite a bit. There's also, of course, microbes that also stimulate the immune system and things like that. So it's like you give the plant lots of good nutrition, but like if it doesn't have like the weapons, it doesn't really matter. Does that make sense? So there's all these different factors you have to consider.
Well, it just reminds me of Terrence McKenna. How come the deeper in you go, the bigger it gets? And I think of the three-dimensional model. It must have been AI. I don't know if you guys saw it recently. You've seen the picture of the cell, and it's just like all these little dots everywhere and squigglies. Well, they created like a three-dimensional version of it moving, of a cell moving. And I stared at it for about 30 minutes the other day. It absolutely blew my mind. It was the most psychedelic thing I've ever seen. And then it realized, like, oh, yeah, like everything is more complicated than we have any understanding of. And I'm quite certain, even with the level of science that we have and the level of intelligence that the human race has, I sometimes feel like we're still in kindergarten. Maybe that's just a kind of a humble pie, like, yeah, we're always learning. But after staring at that cell, I thought, holy Christ, there's just no way we know even like 1% of what's going on.
Just this morning, just this morning, I was reading a report that came out maybe a day ago, where this research group proposed that ribosomes, which are the things that make the proteins in your cells, um, are maybe also a ancient symbiote, like endosymbiosis, like with mitochondria in eukaryotes. That perhaps this is also the case for ribosomes, which is also interesting to think about too. I didn't read through all of it, so I can't really comment, and I'm not a evolutionary developmental biologist or any of that stuff, but it's fascinating stuff. I like to read about this kind of thing, and on a basic level, we as growers, like, I think that like that kind of like deep esoterica might seem like it's not relevant, but it's actually very relevant. Like in this deep dive powdery mildew presentation I'm working on for my YouTube channel, a little video essay about powdery mildew and where it comes from and how it works. I do go into its evolution a little bit to show that it's actually something that came from kind of beneficial soil fungi. And then it used those traits that we always, say are really great, really amazing, allow the plants to have a good interaction, get nutrients. They then turn those to parasitism and become really successful. So don't be afraid or don't be surprised when maybe it's a little more difficult to deal with them. You know what I'm saying? Have a little respect.
Yeah, have a little respect is right. That's absolutely insane. The double-edged sword, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna use all this to slice and dice, and then they flip the sword, and it's like, oh shit, now we're over here cutting it all up. That didn't work in our favor quite as much as it did over here. That is interesting. Well, I look forward to seeing that powdery mildew presentation. I'm always interested to, the first time I photographed powdery mildew, I was just in shock because I was like, okay, that's what powdery mildew looks like. Like, what the hell? Of course, I have to share it because whenever I talk about it, but this was the first image I ever
Wow.
photographed. It was 2008. It's a little blurry, but it gives you an idea. It lets you see how much thicker the trichomes are than the powdery mildew itself. And it lets you see the sort of like almost like exoskeleton insect type body that's just building these like sections, almost like little worms. But the first time I saw it under a microscope, I was kind of like, ooh, like it didn't make me feel good. I'll tell you that much.
And think like that colony is making all these spores and they're moving around and
God.
you know um one of the well I'll tell you this one myth about powdery mildew that's often talked about, and even myself used to say this as well, is that they that relative humidity or airflow will solve the problem for you, low relative humidity. But the apparently powdery mildew cells are like 70% water, and most fungal cells are like 10% water. And I guess that lets them germinate under dry conditions. They're like out in the sun. Most fungi don't like to be in the sun, right? So, they've got all these adaptations. And if you will um, allow it, if that's possible, I'll send a request here. I do have an example of what the ancestor or like the closest relative of powdery mildews look like for a comparison.
All right. I feel like this could be like hilarious. Like you could just put up a picture of a person you don't like, and it could be like a kind of comedy skit. But all right. I'm trusting you, Matthew.
I like to make a bit. That's true. You are right. That's a good idea for later.
Yeah, this
But
is one of the ancestors of powdery mildew, and then shows someone you don't like. This is the
David
guy
Spade.
responsible for all of it. Yeah, David Spade's been doing it. Oh shit. Heliotales overview.
Yeah, so
Arachnophesiza.
Heliotales is the overarching order that powdery mildews belong to.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the fungi look like this or this. Um, or this. They've got these cups, they got these webbed mycelium, and they break down wood, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
so they turned that into powdery mildew infecting living tissue. So they made this jump from dead material to trees like oaks and beech and birch, like 70 million, 100 million years ago. And then when daisies and herbaceous plants came in around 70 million years ago, 50 million years ago, they jumped. And then they went gangbusters because they went from a host that lives a long time and doesn't grow very much, very fast, to a host that's germinating, growing, and dying within a year. So evolution is more of a big deal. The plants can also evolve countermeasures quicker, so the powdery mildew had to adapt, and that's why we deal with such a odious powdery mildew that can adapt so much.
The cups remind me of the bird's nest fungus.
Yes, very similar,
I
isn't it?
wonder if there's a connectivity there in between, like the fact that they're growing in almost the same way, except the bird's nest aren't furry like that. They don't have that extra.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that well that cup shape I think is like pretty ancient.
I think so too.
A lot of different I don't know if it's a pleomorphy or what, where it's like they all evolved it independently or there was like an ancestor with it and then they either independently lost or gained or that kind of stuff happens all the time. But powdery
Dude,
mildew doesn't have any of that. They got rid of all of that. They didn't
they
need
went
it.
rogue.
They did go rogue, yes.
I've always been amazed, and I probably mentioned it maybe before when you were on the show, but I remember reading Paul Stamets talking about how mushrooms can literally be just growing near one another and like pull expressions from one another, like literally pull genetic expressions that they don't have without any evolution whatsoever. They just somehow get exposed to it in their morphogenetic resonance. I don't know what pathway that exists, but there has to be some sort of highway or pathway that is able to happen. But imagine a mushroom growing next to another mushroom and this mushroom maybe has the ability to squirt out a little acid and break down calcium into liquid, but the other mushroom doesn't have that ability. It can acquire that ability just from growing next to it. Now, I don't know if there's a if the hyphae and the mycelium is interacting under the soil and communicating. I have no idea what it is, but it intrigues me, and it truly just lets me know that if anything on this planet is alien, it's the fungi.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. I know there's like bacteria and stuff that can take what's called eDNA or environmental DNA and then integrate that into their own genome. And that's why biofilms can be so problematic because you can get these maybe closely related or sometimes distantly related microbes and they can start to exude things and then
Proliferate.
absorb those and then yeah utilize those things. So it's really crazy with like antibiotic resistance. Those resistant bacteria get into like the ocean and then they give those segments of DNA to other bacteria. And that's a real thing that's already happened.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. This science, it's like this to me is the most exciting kind of science where you're just like figuring out pathways and mechanisms that these things utilize. And really, as we're learning, because we don't know how old they are, how long they are, you could start studying something tomorrow that basically changed later in the afternoon, not like 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years. Like there's no idea on the timestamp on some of these things because it's so fluid with
Powder
mycelium and fungi and bacteria.
powdery mildew does it intraseasonally. You can get adaptations and specializations to various crops and even cultivars, and they can break resistances and resistant genes, their effect within like one season. It's been shown in other crops. That's why, and the reason for this, if you want to go into why that's crazy, is that to get to where they were, powdery mildew's lost a bunch of genes that regulate their genome. And to oversimplify it, to make it an interesting story, they've got like 60% of all the genes in their body are for manipulating the plant. And when those barriers went away, they basically just started mutating all the time, moving around on the genome. And for us, that would kill us. But for them, it made it so that when they make like millions of spores, those genes that are a lemon, those interactions that don't work, they die off. The ones that do, however, well, they're successful, and then they iterate on that, and they iterate on that, and each successful colony does this very quickly. So, yeah, isn't that crazy? So that's what we're contending with powdery mildews, especially the ones in cannabis, which I'm sorry to say, we have some of the really hybrid prone and mutation prone, adaptation prone, wide host species type species that we deal with.
Well, think of how many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of small little laboratories, indoor growers have been growing powdery mildew and breeding powdery mildew and teaching it resistance. And instead of just, I guess, learning. And I've always been like, oh, you just need to set off a nuclear bomb in there and you'll be fine. Just bomb the whole thing. I mean, generally we would reserve that for the two-spotted spider mites there, but powdery mildew I saw wreak havoc on so many grower friends of mine. And there's always oh, you just use the 8.3. Oh, you just do this, you just do that. There's always people that have sort of figured little things out that work for them. But with powdery mildew, my worry is much like drying hash, that the solution for drying hash in Colorado is not the solution for drying hash in Oregon. And I'm guessing bugs are no different.
Yes, I feel this is the truth. I feel like this is the case for a lot of people, and so I it's really hard to be it's hard to be broad and generalized when it comes to that kind of a thing. It's always context dependent. And
Mm.
also what are your goals too, like obviously scale is a big part of that. But like other things are really important to as well. Like, maybe you don't want to use certain products. Certainly noxious compounds shouldn't be used ever, but it's all about like what you have access to. When I work with people in different countries, that's a big one too. It's like you can't just say, "Oh, get this product." Like, no, we can't get this here, or there might be a supply issue, or you might need to have alternatives, or that kind of a thing too. So there's all the you can't cultivate yourself out of like extrinsic, extraneous factors that are overwhelming. And having a ton of powdery mildew in your area that's all mutating all around, that kind of stuff might be the case for you, for example, and you can't control that you have an ag plot of land right next to you with the host species rapidly changing.
For sure. Well said.
Can you guys hear
Rapidly
me?
changing. We can
Can,
hear you. You sound
okay.
perfect.
Is there
I
no
had to
echo?
mute you earlier because
No echo now.
there was an
Yeah.
echo. Yeah, exactly. There was an
Ah,
echo.
I got the headphones on. That works all the time,
Beautiful.
right?
You know what? I'm the same boat, Mark. I
Yeah.
just wear the headphones now.
Yeah.
It's not the funnest thing to do for 4 hours at a time, but holy, look at
Sure.
these regulars just popping in like it's Sunday
Yeah.
at 9 a.m. or
Hey,
something.
Matt. Good to see you again. Good to always hear you. It's
Likewise.
yeah, reminiscent of a couple conversations we've had.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew this, but in a former life when I was working at a chemical company, we were working on wood preservatives, and a big thing about a wood preservative, and we're not talking about Viagra. People, get your mind out of the gutter here. Um, is
That's good.
yeah, so that green jungle juice that they squeeze into lumber, so you could use it for picnic tables and boat docks, and the biggest, well, one of the issues is termites, but another big issue is fungi, and I think like wood. If you think about it, well, it grows on trees, right? Um, so many like
Some of
one-liners
them,
here,
yeah.
right? It's like so it grows on trees, and think about it. If there was no wood decay fungi, all the forests would have like fallen trees over and nothing would degrade it. So it's a good thing we do have fungi that basically live off dead timber, right? Because that helps keep the forest clean, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you can think about it just in terms of there's an available food source, right? And if it's wet enough and the spores are there, yeah, they're going to take advantage of it. And goddamn, I mean, Stamets says it all the time. They have their own fucking kingdom, right? I mean, it's like they're as diverse as like the animal kingdom. You could have what little toads, you could have big elephants, you could have polar bears and dogs and us, and right. I mean, fungi are just
It's a
as diverse,
standalone
right?
kingdom. There's no
Yeah,
doubt about it.
it is, and
It's a standalone kingdom. And the reason that is because it's there's the only thing we've ever found in space still living, trapped in cosmic radiation pressure, was spores. So spores can travel space and
yeah,
broccoli can't and frogs can't and
yeah,
nothing
no,
else
right.
can, but fucking spores can. Continue,
Oh,
please.
But
tardigrades,
so yeah, so
tardigrades can.
There you go.
yeah, and probably roaches too, right? So
They're
like
working on it.
what we learned by like so we were particularly, Matthew, looking at like basidiomyces and Traumates versicolor, I think, is another one.
Okay, the
Basically,
turkey tails.
yeah, turkey tails. Two kinds of fungi attack wood. So if you just put like untreated lumber out in North America or anywhere really, in fact in the tropics it's worse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
eventually it basically
yeah.
succumbs to fungal attack, right?
Now
But
that's a
what we
con.
found
It
well, what
is
we found out, which was super interesting,
reishi.
is that the initial attack is not by fungi, and it's no surprise, it's by bacteria, right?
Oh,
So
interesting.
bacteria kind of so when wood like so what we were doing is we were putting stakes in the ground in places like Florida in pretty swampy areas that if you put an untreated piece of wood in the ground, it's gone like a year later, either from termite pressure
Nice.
or from fungi. And we would basically send teams down to the jungle and they'd pull up these stakes. They were like paint stirrers like this. See,
Yes,
I
yeah.
got a wook on a paint stirrer in case somebody starts acting wook like, right?
Oh.
We can take them on. So yeah, we would put
Sweet.
like paint stirrers, treat them with chemical, put them in the ground, and then go back like like 6 months at a time, pull them up and look to see is the wood rotting or whatnot. But what we found out, which was super interesting, is that there's a symbiotic relationship between pseudomonad type bacteria that actually initially infest the wood, and these bacteria are super primitive in that they exude cellulases which start chopping up the cellulose, and then that rings the dinner bell for the fungi that come in after, you know and yeah, so there's this symbiotic relationship and probably a chemical ecology network that they somehow communicate with each other, because what we found is that if we put the right chemicals in the wood, we could knock out the bacteria, and guess what, the fungi can't come in. Also, the same thing with termites, which I thought was super interesting, is that termites this is really interesting. Termites rely on a bacteria in their gut to to hydrolyze cellulose. So they chew cellulose, right? And they're chewing wood, right? But they need this bacteria in the gut. So if you target the bacteria in the gut, you could basically knock out the termite colony, right? So yeah, there's all kinds of ways of approaching these things, but it's interesting perhaps in cannabis again that there's some sort of symbiotic relationship between the good microbes, good bacteria, or good, healthy components of a living soil that can basically stave off not only fungal but also insect pressure, right? I mean, isn't the chemistry that goes on in the rhizosphere, so to speak, also controlling chemical cues that insects basically act on and can either draw insects to a plant or basically, repel them from plants as well?
Yeah, it is true. It's also true that there are pathogens that lots of pathogens, including powdery mildew and some of these necrotrophs like fusarium and other ones that they they co-opt microbes that we would normally consider beneficial. So again, it's like I encounter a lot of, different opinions about pests and what makes sense or doesn't make sense for a particular, outlook. Like, do you want to, if you add microbes, you won't have pathogens, or if you have a mulch layer, you won't get, powdery mildew or certain other, uh, negative microbes like pathogens because, it benefits the nutrient uptake, or if it benefits the plants like a rhizosphere in some way that helps the good guys. But the good guys can also be the bad guys sometimes. There's a lot of contextual things that happen, and certainly, like in the case of powdery mildews, they used to be good guys, kind of. And then they, through association, lots of symbioses, mutualists, parasites, those can switch too. You get parasites that become more mutualistic with their host sometimes over long and short evolutionary time periods. Um, so all of that stuff is in play, and I think that, like, yeah, if you really, if you oversimplify the biology, even if you're someone who's a very big fan of like implementing biology, you can still make yourself vulnerable to issues.
But certainly, like, you can't affect one system without somehow affecting the other. Like, like, so the time course of evolution, especially with fungi, have learned how to take advantage of available food sources, energy sources. You know, you think about like even just evolution in general. I mean, the organisms that live down on those vents in the ocean that is spewing out hydrogen sulfide, right, which is rotten egg, right? And they figured out, oh, there's sulfur here. Let's see what can we do. Like, how can we somehow, use this as a food source? So if there's a food source on planet Earth, there's a fungi or a whole zoo of fungi that have figured out how to use it as a productive food
For
source.
energy. Well, for
Right.
powdery mildews, as they became, and we don't have all the information about, all the graduations and all that sort of stuff, but by and large, as powdery mildews became what they were now, what they are now today, they lost a bunch of genes that regulated their genome, but also they lost genes that were related to taking up and processing metabolites and organic matter that they had in their previous lifestyle no longer became useful or helpful. There are bacteria and aphids that are the same way. They were free living E. coli, and then they became, defense, bacteria for them, or other sorts of really important nutrient synthesizers or amino acid synthesizers for the host. Anyways, and their genome got broken down in aphids, and now they're like a symbiont. So in powdery mildews, they lost like the ability to assimilate certain kinds of phosphorus sources outside of living plant tissue phosphorus sources, sulfur sources, and other sorts of nutrients, and breaking those down. They even lost some because they still need cellulase and other ones to break down cellulose, but they lost other cellulase type enzymes that break down other woody material because they don't use it. They're mostly on leaves, sometimes on stem material, sometimes on, it depends a lot on the species we're talking about here, but in like the ones that most people deal with on like herbaceous vegetable crops, they can also be on the flower too of certain plants or on the fruits as well. So they evolved and they honed to only really use because the genes that were lost didn't really matter, right? So now they are very much honed to manipulating the plant and getting their own resources to the detriment of those other lifestyle genes that were useful in the past. But there's a risk to this. I think you're familiar, Mark, with Muller's ratchet.
I'm
The
not.
idea,
No.
the idea that basically as you tack on mutations or if you become more mutable, if your genome becomes more prone to these mutations and stuff, then it could give you some benefits, but over time there's this breakdown in your genetics and your genome, and it makes you very fragile, maybe adaptation lame. You kind of an evolutionary dead end can occur, or like your ability to like regulate, yeah, basic important processes could go out of whack. So there's like a idea that as this process continues, you get like what happens in aphids, where the bacteria that used to be a type of E. coli became, almost like integrated into the genome of the aphid, or at least it's passed on vertically, and it lost all the genes that were important for even synthesizing nutrients for itself, some of them. So it's kind of incredible. Like there's no free lunch in physics, which I think is the point you were making, and I think it's
Yeah.
eloquently put.
Yeah. No free lunch in physics. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. But that's true for plant defense too, um, there's weaknesses that the pests have, there's weaknesses that the plants have, and they've learned to exploit them. So, we shouldn't be surprised that there's like, three-handed handshakes and things like this that go a little bit indirect that we also have to consider. And those interactions, you're right, could be more efficient than, going at it head on. If you only have to get rid of the bacteria, you don't have to spray like a noxious insecticide, right?
Right.
For powdery mildew, maybe we can apply something sulfur is an example, but you can't use it in all cases. But like, it's not probably not going to resist wettable sulfur anytime soon.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's like there's mycoviruses that naturally exist on the planet and apparently are very common, according to some studies. And they make powdery mildews hypovirulent, and it makes
Right.
them unable to colonize the plant surface or do it very, very poorly. I
Well,
wonder.
and you got to wonder. I mean, the other factor that makes me think about like what you're talking about is then you throw humans into the equation, right? And
Yes,
it's like
yeah, exactly.
it's like between like cross contaminate. I mean, we could be on one continent and a day later be on a completely different continent, right? And be cross contaminating, you know, biomes, by a jet plane, right? Uh, and
Yes.
a perfect example of this that you'll love too is the Formosan termite is actually not native to North America, and actually,
Yeah.
yeah, check this out, Atian. So when they brought surplus equipment back from the Southern Pacific after World War II, they brought a lot of equipment that was crated up in wood back to Air Force bases and Navy bases along the southern United States. And they didn't realize, but there were Formosan termites that had infested those crates. And that's what brought the Formosan termite to, say, Louisiana. And, like in and around, the French Quarter and in and around New Orleans, they had a huge Formosan termite. And Formosans are man, they will eat through concrete to get the wood. They are and they fly, so they'll get up into your soffits and up into the framing of your wood. They're just
Uniquely, they eat dead and living wood, which is not usually the
right.
case, right? That's what makes them so like onerous. That's a big part of it, at least.
Yeah, so like the white subterranean termite that you usually see like down south, as long as you have the right building envelope around where your wood is. Like they have these termite shields, and then there's usually like baits that they put in and around the structures of homes to actually draw the termites in. You can kind of keep your homes termite free. But those formosans, yeah, were, again, I get the point of the discussion, was brought to this continent by,
Yeah,
by
Well, that's what
humans,
we
damn it.
do. We are the
we
carriers.
do.
We're the
Well,
sporulators.
Exactly.
and you can do everything right. Like what gets me is that you can do like you can like grow like if in this like way that you think is maybe superior or like with like really good rotations or like organically or regeneratively or in all these different contexts. And like, that's really good for making sure that you are not yourself like kind of spreading the pests or like you have this like really competent defense that might not, you know, uh, uh, help along their selection pressures as much as possible. And on the other hand, you can have what I often say in my presentations, you've got the US has it somewhat too, but Brazil, China, and India are three really big agricultural meccas that they spray so much of these compounds that other places say we shouldn't use and that we have laws against using. But those
Yeah.
chemicals are like a giant gym for those bugs,
Yeah.
those
The
pests, the same ones we
neonics.
deal with.
The
They get
Yeah.
really
neonics.
good at what they do, and then they
Yeah.
come over here, and then us who
Right.
were playing the right game, doing the right thing, wherever that might be on the earth. Well, now you've got, the Plant Crusher 9000, and those plant defenses that use those chemicals, those proteins the plant makes, those things are, the same gene resistance genes that work against like DDT in the case of like budworms are the same ones that are detoxifying these natural compounds too. So it's not like they're different classes necessarily. They do the same thing and there's cross resistance now. Now the pest comes and is able to take care of the plant no problem. So it's like communally, globally, we kind of all have to be on the same page. And if we're not, or we outsource
Yeah.
it, it's going to come back to us. You can't outrun it that way. And some governments have also thought, well, it's okay as long as they do it over there, as long as they do the production over there. But that's not true. Things move around quicker than they did when the continents were together. It's crazy, to your point.
Yeah, I think like what I'm hearing here is, and it's good to be here with y'all. My time's going to be short for a little bit, but I'll be back. I hear like the systems in which we all use, right? Let's just use the word system because these are systems, right? And these systems around the world are slightly different from one another. And I've had to adapt. Like I learned early broad mites were like hell and high water for me. I had to learn a lot to disrupt their cycle, right? That alone taught me a tremendous amount. Like, I mean, this is years, I mean, of learning, you know what I mean? And I still consider that an ongoing thing, and I'm still like keep one eye open thinking about it, about the grow, and then for instance, you were talking about powder mildew and botrytis. Like we use QST 713. We have to. I mean, we're a regulated business. Like we can't not use these things. And those that don't know what that is, that's an OMIR listed biological fungicide, a fungicidal bacteria, Bacillus subtilis strain. So it's these are things that we have to build systems for because we don't know, and that's again why passing clones around is really dangerous, because you just don't know. I tend to get things tested for eggs at medicinal genomics because even when you think something's clean, you don't know. Like you could really just, you don't know because you've used a system that's worked before. Sometimes these things have flaws, or you miss something, or they had the whatever you're fighting had a hatching a day earlier or a day later. You know what I mean? There's something that goes along with this that breaks that system that you're used to. It's frightening. So those that are out there doing this at scale, you know what I'm talking about. So and even down to a tent grower, like, I encourage you guys to really develop a system for yourself, whether it's sachets or whatever it might be, building a relationship with that. But I think, everything that I'm hearing from you, Matthew, is really amazing because it's the truth, you know? across the board. And we all have to kind of learn together because there's so much, and it's always evolving.
That's
That's
the
what I
thing,
kind
right?
of,
I don't know all the information either, right? But it is always
yeah,
evolving. So encouraging that like scholarly attitude, I think is really important because also, we didn't always do it very well in the past, but I think more
totally.
than ever, and I mean, certainly things are more complicated than ever, but also I think the ability to simplify it has become more common. So it's a little bit more,
Yeah,
a lot of information is more accessible, at least a little bit, and I see it when I talk to people or I go to events and people are like, people are coming to me, oh, I read about this thing about like, aphid evolution or how the physiology works or whatever. And that's really great because like, yeah, I think that it gives you informed decisions. It gives you the power to like look at a product even or a biological product or a chemistry or a whatever, and you can be like, oh, is this relevant? Or oh, maybe there's a way I can accentuate it and make it better,
yeah,
for my use case. There's all these really cool avenues of approach that used to be you don't have the knowledge, let alone the technological access, but now people got 3D printers and people doing other kinds of cool things by themselves, and I
yeah.
think that we'll see a lot
And
of
it's
that in the
scale.
future.
There's
Yeah.
better products today than we ever had access to. Like Veronate is another amazing set of tools, I recommend for people out there. It's great for soft body, you know, IPM because it's not an oil. It it's great. So, yeah, there's a lot to share with one another to, as I say, grow better resin and grow healthier environments for people to be in while they do it. Because it's very, that's the other side of it is do we really want to be around this in a room? Even sulfur, like I think sulfur is a wonder child, right? But I think it can be caustic. It can be really,
Yes,
it can
definitely.
get into your nose and air pathways
I
and
hate sulfur. I don't, people are like, oh, I only spray it in veg. I'm like, have you microscopically photographed your plants in veg and noticed all the trichomes on the leaf surfaces? No,
Yeah.
no, I didn't realize that. I didn't think that the plant produced trichomes when it was so small. I'm like, it actually
Oh,
produces trichomes as a seedling.
yeah,
Seedlings have trichomes on the epicotyl. So
that's true.
it's very
yeah,
true. I photographed it. That's how I learned. There was no pictures on the internet. I had to take these pictures myself. And when I did, it fucking blew my mind. It was as simple as like one of the reasons I love macro photography is because it can open your mind in a way that maybe, someone like you or Jeff Lowenfils or someone explaining it on a level, it just goes right over their head. But then you show them the picture and you're like, oh, great. That's what it's like. Yeah, there's this sort of, I felt with macro photography, especially for cannabis, the more I took pictures that had never really been posted on mass in public, you could find some university photographs of an electron scan microscope, from the 90s. Joop Dumas from Holland had that. There was a couple of guys doing the photography. Jason King kind of came around, but there was no real, like, for me, I learned most of my in my macro world. And funny enough, Matthew, how I learned how to photograph cannabis is very much the opposite of how much the younger generation is learning today. They buy stacking units, they buy rail systems where the camera can move a millimeter at a time. They have a button where they're moving everything. And nothing against that. Like, I was talking to Zoom Gardens in Massachusetts recently, and the guy can take like 60,000 shots or something in an afternoon. He's just taking 1,000 shots and stacking them together with a program. Well, I did the opposite. I took single shots. All of my macro photographs that you'll see online are single shots. And how I learned how to manipulate and control my depth of field, and more importantly, how I learned to not go into gardens and say, well, could you just cut that bud off, and you could just cut that bud off and cut that. I shot in rooms where the plants were still alive on the stalk. And I shot in rooms where I'd feel bad if I had to ask them to turn the fan off because I didn't want to leave a footprint while I was in the room. But I, get the fans turned off maybe for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time. And how I learned how to take macro handheld photographs is by going down at 6 in the morning to my local beach. There we have these two big wooden, almost like just like power lines, right? Big trees that have been stripped down, but they were actually just an entrance to our beach. And I would go there and I'd put my camera on that, and I'd see these little like weevils, and I don't even know the names of them. These fat little body, they got the antennas. Amazing bug to learn how to manipulate and move your depth of field, because it's moving. It almost never stops moving. And, it took me years to learn that another way to manipulate the depth of field with bugs is if you catch them and put them in the fridge or the freezer for a short period of time, you can reduce their animation to the point where they're almost frozen. Now, you don't want to freeze them, and I'm not torturing and killing them, but you put them in for about a minute and a half, you pull them out, you got about 3 or 4 minutes to photograph that bug before it starts, moving around again. So bugs were a huge part of how I learned how to take macro photographs, by holding the camera in my hand, and the whole motion of, just following it. It's this tiny little bug. Those were some of my funnest photography days by myself. People would walk by and go, "What are you doing?" I have this lens. It's like this long. I'm holding it right up against the tree. It's like a millimeter away from the tree. And then you show the person the picture and they're like, "That's what's on the tree?" They're just like, once you start macro photographing bugs, you immediately learn where Hollywood came up with all of its aliens, all of its monsters, all of its, the faces that open up, the jowls that have multiple, the predator, all of that comes from like praying mantis and different bugs that are very specifically fucking terrifying, to be honest, to see under a very,
if they were our size,
oh,
for
dude,
sure.
forget about it. No, forget about it.
Forget about it.
If
Yeah,
they
we
were
would not be
60
dominant.
pounds, dude,
Yeah,
if they
I know,
had
right?
60-pound praying mantises, we'd all be dead.
Yeah, it'd be really bad. I think
it'd be really
terrible.
bad.
Yeah, or jumping spiders, that would be terrible. That'd be
Dude,
worse than a tiger, man.
those are my friends. I will be honest. The Celicitae jumping spider is probably my favorite insect. They have personality, they have warmth, they have attention and awareness that other bugs that I photograph don't even fucking know I'm there. If you get into wasps and bees and the aggressive bugs, they know you're there. A lot of the non-aggressive bugs, you don't exist to them. You're just
true.
not, they're not vibrating at a frequency that can even perceive you.
They can barely resolve images in most of these cases.
Jumping spiders, I swear to God, recognizes when I smile. Like the way they turn their heads and the little motion of their bodies. Some of my favorite pictures have been jumping spiders. In fact, one of my favorite photos I ever took in my life, I remember I had one, we were playing, he was walking around, and I was like, oh, I should put him on like a flower or something and take a picture of him. So I put him on a oh, that's not the one. I put him on dandelion, and I photographed oh damn, it's not the right password. I really hope I can find this password.
I'm very curious to hear it and see it.
Yeah, here we go. I'm just getting into my Flickr account now, so I should be able to do this.
I saw this like color wash across you. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a bright photo.
Yeah, it's a really cool photo in the sense that I've taken better photos since, but this one was pretty cool in the sense that
I like this a lot.
This fun little attention. And sorry, this is actually not a Celicidae. This is a different type, but definitely from that family. These are all macro photographs I took that day. And then here, if you look up close into his eyes, above his mustache, you can see the flower petals of the dandelion refracting in the image inside his eyes. So that was a cool one. And then I can never show these without showing. My son grabbed this from outside.
Oh, yeah.
It was just ice, and that was the one that had the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus. I thought that was pretty funny.
Look at that.
Yeah, I did not manipulate this photo at all. My 4-year-old son went outside. He collected a bunch of ice off the deck, and he said, "Dad, can you take a picture of the ice?" And it's like, "Sure, dude, I'll take a picture." I took the picture. I didn't edit it for like a month. I remember going back and looking at it and going, "What the fuck?" I'm not religious, by the way, at all. I don't look for things in my imagery that aren't there. But I showed this image to like 20 people, and they're all like, I mean, it definitely looks like a person in a robe holding a baby. I said, yeah,
No,
it's
it
one.
does. No, I see that for sure. I feel like I would see that in some like fantasy video game or something, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like some robed figure at least with
Yeah.
that hexagonal, framing.
So you must spend a lot of time on microscopes and in that world. Don't you feel that when you go into the bug or really the macroscopic or the microscopic world, that you are in a different world? Doesn't it teach you about perspective and perception and how if you change your perception, you change your perspective? And I never understood that as much as going into these little tiny worlds where these little creatures exist.
I think so. We're met, we're born to natively see a certain resolution of the world. So of course when we see a bigger or smaller resolution of that, it does change things quite a bit. I also feel like well, I was going to say something particular about that. Yeah, I mean, like I feel I've always said that like the mythos about like fairies and like even like things like specters and things that are invisible perhaps or not always so invisible. That's kind of how microbes are too, when you think about it. Before people had an idea, a very a crisp, well-defined idea of like the microbiological world is what I'm trying to say here. Obviously we benefited from these invisible creatures for a long time, like with fermentation and making cheeses and other sorts of things like that. And to me, it's like magical in the traditional sense of the word, really. It really is. And I think a lot of the metaphors from such stories about such creatures like Fae being mischievous or possibly even dangerous, because they'll riddle you or they'll do things that are like counter to what you would think would be the case. I feel like it's an excellent metaphor for like you know pest management in my case, but also just in looking at the world in general and how we interact with these organisms because it can be capricious. It cannot be always so reliable. Sometimes they're incredibly reliable, or you can rely on them to be their way about things, perhaps as well. So I think it's very useful as a perspective tool.
Absolutely. 100%. Well, I think it's almost time for a morning dab for myself. I have not had a dab today. I actually fly to Michigan today for my first trip ever to Michigan later on after
All
Hash Church. I'll
right.
be heading down there and spending a bunch of time in like Monroe down at the lab. I'll be spending time in Lansing and even Detroit. So it's kind of yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they got going on. I know they got crazy shit going on. They got like the plague in their soil there. What is it? Is it botrytis or
Is it Septoria?
septoria, dude? Oh
Yeah.
my god. What is that?
Yeah, it's a big deal. And as I got through talking to somebody recently about it's really terrible. It's a really difficult pest pathogen. It's been in a lot of other crops. There's all kinds of septoria. Kind of like everything I said about powdery mildew practically is true. Not like its evolution, but like its capability, its ability to hybridize a lot, its ability to move great distances, and its ability to specialize on different kinds of hosts. It's got that in spades. Um, through different mechanisms. But what's worse is that whereas powdery mildew, true to its symbiotic past, it can only really exist on living tissue. Septoria does not do this, like botrytis or fusarium and some of these other necrotrophs. It destroys the tissues and just keeps going and systemically, colonizes the plant. But what septorias do uniquely, which makes them even worse than some of those others I mentioned, is that they're much more capable subsisting on dead organic tissue and also other hosts for that matter, in the soil, in the substrate. So the problem is that you might get rid of them on the crop, or you might deal with them or endure them in some way. Um, and then you think everything is fine, but because they blew in already, and they might even have been in your soil if you got new soil or something like this too, they're there now. If they weren't there, they're there now, right there. So when you put your next plants in, it's like you're dealing with them on day one, day zero, in fact, instead of before. So there's this kind of, so this can have like a double whammy where like the last crop you just had, your exposure to them might have been problematic but doable, and now right afterwards you weren't expecting it. Now you have the rug pulled out of your off your under your feet, right? And that's kind of what trips people up quite a bit. And then all the plants around, if you're growing in a greenhouse or exposed to the outdoors, it's in your region now. And there's not a lot of biocontrols, for example, that take it to the hills. There's research from University of Kentucky where they looked at a bunch of really common biocontrols that are very commonly used in cannabis and abroad. This for hemp technically, but this is how they do the research, right? And even the noxious compounds, even the fungicides you wouldn't use in cannabis, were not altogether particularly effective. If you consider compared to control, still like a 30 or 40% infection rate is still like not tenable for most crops, right? Um, so yeah, so I'm not here to say that I have the secret sauce and I have the solution and the truth, and you should just have to just buy my book or my process, for 19.99, and you'll have no problems, right? What I'm trying to illustrate is that I don't know anyone who is legitimately doing quantified, testing, which is really important here. I want to say people can make claims about whatever, but I have found a lot of people struggle with septoria. And I find that some people, the best solution, the most feasible, practicable solution is actually sometimes to change your exposure to the septoria because it's so overwhelming. And
Yeah.
maybe there are resistant plants out there, and maybe there are other microbes out there that are going to be more useful or that we can find. But I have found like a lot of the trichodermas and the other ones that people are very familiar with, they're just not cutting it in a way that is economical for people who are growing,
Well,
if
that's
that makes
it.
sense.
I mean,
So like
go ahead.
yeah, I would say like in a vacuum or in a very controlled space, you could perhaps make it work. But what I'm saying is that people in the field where it matters are having lots of trouble. And I think that that's a really important thing. That's a really important distinction to make, right?
I think it's a really important distinction. I was partnered up with a group down in Michigan. They were outdoor growers. They had about 17 acres going. They were called Rollganics. They were all organic, doing regenerative as much as they could. The Septoria was absolutely destroying them. And so the 1 year they were like, okay, well the farmers had basically figured, look, it's the rain, it's hitting the soil, and then it's bouncing up onto the plant, and that's how it is. That's the main pathway for like 95% of this shit. And so they
Yeah.
did something they didn't want to do. They covered the whole field in a plastic, and it took all of minutes before they posted that Josh and Kelly from Dragonfly Earth Medicine were shaming them on Instagram. And I was like, guys, like, dude, like these guys are trying their hardest. Like, give them props for what they're doing right, not shame for what they're, that because they're using, he was like, oh, the plastic, you shouldn't be using the plastic, which was funny because Josh sent me a video later. He's like, oh, I'm just closing my greenhouse right now. I'm like, oh, with what? He's like, oh, my tarps. I'm like, what are your tarps made out of? Long pause. He's like,
Right.
metal. Joking because he knew, and he was like, well, but I use my tarps over and over again, and he's just using that as a one time. I got where they were coming from, but they don't grow 17 acres. You know what I mean? Like they're growing a
I do
much
know what you mean.
smaller amount. It's the vacuum that you speak of. It's easy to
Yes.
come up with fixes in a smaller amount. Go plant it in a 20-acre crop. Now you're into something called agriculture. It's totally different from what we do on the side of a mountain or in our backyard. Now, this is like 17 acres. So they had a hugely successful year from doing that. They didn't want to do it, they didn't like the idea of it, but the plastic was so helpful. It kept the shit from bouncing. Obviously, they trimmed up, they lollipopped as high as they could as well, and they did some other things. These are hardcore farmers that are like, putting bokashi by hand into 8,000 plants. Um, it's a lot of work, you know what I mean? And these guys want to do it right, but not at the expense of losing an entire crop. So they made the choice. We're going to do this. They ended up getting like 125,000 pounds of fresh frozen from that, doing that. Whereas it was a fraction of that the year before because this damn Septoria just absolutely crushed them.
It's a
So
it's a it's a very relatable story, and And you know, like that's so like your example here, these are like horticultural techniques, right? They aren't even considered like, you know, the typical buzzwords of like using a microbial or some sort of plant extract or something like this, you know. It was by solarization, I think is part
Yeah.
of it too, maybe. And then also, yeah, like cutting off the ability for the septoria, because it's true that is a very common way for septorias and many other similar kinds of microbes to bounce up from the substrate into the foliage. Like, you know, like as a contrary to powdery mildew, for example, you know, powdery mildews, ironically, despite their lineage being the way that it is, they don't really have an association with the soil, really. Maybe sometimes debris falls, and then in nature, the seeds come back up, and then some of these sexual spores that are in this really indurated structure they release, and then sometimes the spores get on the young new plants for the next generation. But typically, most powdery mildews we care about are asexual, and those spores
Hmm.
don't hang around a long time. So
Right.
like there's a big difference. You can't use the same logic for one fungus that maybe has a lot of similar physiology to another thing. You have to learn the difference between their life cycles, their abilities, what are some of the plants. And there's tons of different septoria, possibly more than, if I'm conservative here, maybe three or four species, you know, of Septoria that can colonize cannabis, and maybe they have different abilities or possibly even subtypes that are again specialized for cannabis in particular, and that remains to be like articulated. But we see it in many other crops, so it wouldn't be surprising to me, especially since cannabis and Septoria has been in North America, for example, for hundreds of years, right?
Hmm.
That's enough time usually for these effects to occur.
I often wonder, like, if the DEA had half a brain back in the day, if they were just like, we're going to buy ProMix, the company, we're just going to infest it with mildews and spider mites and thrips, and then all the growers will come and buy it, and we'll see how well they do. And I'm not a big conspiracy guy. I've heard the conspiracy that there's ticks that have been released out east, that there's an enormous amount of ticks that make you allergic to meat and all these other things. That just kind of blows by. But I thought, man, like, I'll tell you, if you really wanted to eradicate a plant like cannabis, you got to think they must have been doing some like bug and viral and bacteria work back in the day to
They did.
they did.
There's documented evidence of them at least considering it. But
Wow.
my understanding is that there's no real evidence of you know, of them actually implementing. And here's the reason. It's for the reason I just said about microbes being different and knowing what they do. So to their credit, there's examples where they looked at like certain fusarium populations and like seeing like could we release like a biocontrol plant biocontrol for cannabis using some of these, pathogens. There's a myth about russet mites being used in this way, but that was for Russian star thistle. It was not for cannabis. There's russet mites are very species specific, so it wouldn't have worked for cannabis anyways. But people see russet mite, they see government release, and they go, "Oh my God," you know. So, but that's not the case. But for these examples here that I'm talking about, the problem is that if you were to release it, like Fusarium, for example, that was specialized for this, it's so wildly evolutionarily um, vagile that it will probably also screw up our other crops. So it just didn't make sense to use anything that would be capable, or at least that they had access to. This was like decades ago, though. Perhaps there's a more sophisticated solution potential, but yeah, I think that the problem with using something like that is that it quickly gets out of hand, and there's entire departments, maybe less of them now currently as I speak, but there's certainly departments that were used to like see like to murder board a plan like this and see like are there non-target organisms that will be affected. So usually we're pretty good about that kind of thing lately, I would have to say. And we've even had some turnarounds for certain pests using biocontrols and other non-noxious treatments, whereas some other ones we still spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year trying to nail a solution that's practical, like for the spotted lanternfly that keeps spreading around North America, mostly the U.S. Oh, you're muted.
I was just saying how crazy it is, the relationship that humans have with bugs. We have these like beetles. I don't know if they're or it's in Manitoba. about pine beetles, and they just climb into the trees, and you can drive through the forest and you'll just see huge swaths of trees that are like kindling, just basically dry. They don't have a drop of moisture in them. These beetles burrow into them and consume these things, and you just gotta wonder, like that, what is the system? Is it to thin out the trees? Is it something we've accidentally done because we brought this fucking beetle from somewhere it never was able to travel on the back of an RV to another
That's usually
place?
it. It's usually that, and then also, well, like what can also happen is like we have like where I live in California, and I grew up, I think I mentioned this last hash church, but I was like in the Boy Scouts growing up. I went to Yosemite. I went up Half Dome as like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old. I went up Mount Whitney as like a 14-year-old. I've always been an outdoorsy type person, hiker, and also a lot of places in California where we would have oak cover and pine trees and all this stuff. And it's incredibly sad to see the devastation of the oak trees. And part of the problem is there's exotic beetles that destroy the trees and that kind of thing. But there's also the fact that, like, because some of these oaks have been allowed to propagate so much and so closely together, it kind of augments the effect of the beetle. And so, like in nature, probably there would be a thinning, like you're talking about, a huge extirpation, like naturally, and then you kind of have this like tessellated, developmental like regrowth afterwards. And this is over hundred, over millions of years. Oaks are very ancient. You get these massive groups of oaks that are just everywhere, and then they kind of butt up against the other trees. But nowadays, that's there's pathways that the beetles can exploit without having anything to countermand them. And usually it would have just been space and time and maybe some other factors, but now those big factors are no longer in play. So, like you said, it's totally not related to the pests, like these people who were growing with the tarp. They're just using a technique. It's not chemical, not biological, just a changing in the physics of what's going on. And the same thing is true here. That can be extremely important. It's like an emergent property. You can't tell how a tidal wave happens by looking at a molecule of water. You can't make those inferences at certain scales, and so more becomes complexity just by being more of itself. And I think that's a really interesting concept to go under.
What did you post there, Dr. Mark?
Yeah, I put a paper that I found in chat. I mean, again, I think this is not unique to Japan, but this study was done in Japan on Septoria cannabicola.
Cannabicola, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's right.
so what is that? I mean, I'm looking at this for the first time. So,
Oh, yeah. So it's here actually, since you asked. Uh, I have it here, right? Yes. So Septoria cannabicola is one of those species I was talking about earlier that colonizes cannabis. But there's other ones too, presumably. And they don't seem to be just synonymous with each other. They're actually separate species. How much that matters in the grand scheme of things, I think, it sort of remains to be fully quantified. But usually, different species that are like, I don't know, more than 99 or 98 or whatever the cutoff is in their similarity, like 95% similar genome or whatever, usually there's some differences in what they're capable of and maybe even are able to hybridize if they're truly the same species. Um, but to your point, I have this example from that paper specifically here.
yeah. So if you look at table one, Matt, there's like a bunch of fungal species that they list there, and again, this is where I get lost in the details of exactly what they're trying to show us here.
Oh,
That
okay, let me see.
all these are prevalent in cannabis, or that these can be. So there's Septoria cannabis, which is its own.
You mean this table one here?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, you can see, so you see, so in the, so I mean, we're not
Maybe you
sharing.
could share your
Yeah.
screen. Yeah, Marcus, let him share his screen so he can show this.
Can he not share a screen?
Yeah, I can share.
Yeah, you shared earlier. You asked me permission, which was great because
Yeah,
sometimes you're
yeah,
not able to
yeah. I
find
was gonna share
buttons.
my presentation too, but let's look at this.
Oh yeah,
Let's
yeah.
Share
No,
it.
no, no.
since we're
Share your
talking about it here.
presentation.
No, since we're talking about here we have this. So,
Welcome back, Etienne.
hey there. So yeah, this table one lists of isolates and reference sequences used in the studies. This is just from GenBank. So they're just looking at these. You see, these are the species on this side, fungal species on the left, the locality they found them in, the host they found them on, the strain number that they were given, if given, and then these appear to be the genes, right? Yes, these are
Yeah.
the except. So these are like different, like these are like different, like genetic information, like the ITS band and stuff that they use to like compare different like fungi in this case, for example. Like with powdery
Right.
mildew, you can't tell different species enough just by using like ITS. You have to use like different other genes too that are conserved in
And
that.
those are hot links, right? Like, do those link right to a gene database or something like that that tell you about the gene?
It looks like they are NCBI links still,
Yeah.
if I check them. Yeah. But you could certainly access them. That's what I'm talking about when it comes
Yeah.
to like the ability to use this information for the individual is becoming more possible. There's like hiccups, and I don't always use it or find it practical to do so. But there's people out there, researchers and stuff that I think that with certain mechanisms and software programs, people can like
Oh
make things
yeah. Well,
a bit more.
with AI and
AI,
genetic
of course,
algorithm, you
yes,
could
yeah,
basically mine all kinds of information here. But I
100%.
guess so is the important thing to kind of take away is that so there's a couple different species that live on cannabis, right? Or those are just different
Yes.
locations.
Well, these are different. Well, here, yeah. So to answer exigently, you've got this example here. This is cannabis sativa, but this septoria, all these other septoria cannabis species. This is on cannabis. This is on cannabis. These are all the same species, septoria cannabis, but they're different. You see, they're different strains. You see, so they're different populations that were
So that's a strain of
explored.
the fungus, not the cannabis, right?
Yes, that's my
Okay.
understanding. Yeah, yeah. See, because you see how they have
Because there is no such thing as a strain of cannabis.
Yeah, there is no
right,
right.
yes, yeah. Bingo.
Sorry, maybe that's a dumb
Bingo.
question.
Yeah, get out of here, man.
No dumb questions, especially from the only PhD in the room.
Yeah,
Oh
for
no, stop it.
serious. Yeah, exactly. You gotta
Yeah.
really get it together here. No, but let me show you this. Let me show you this.
Yeah, so maybe go to your presentation, which is
Yes,
probably more
yeah. So
informative than that paper.
no, no, no. It was good paper. It's featured in this presentation. So you got me to
Okay.
you got
It
to
was a
the
good
quick of the
good
issue.
setup for you.
Exactly, exactly. So here we go. So this is from a master IPM presentation I made a while ago. Um, it's not available anywhere, and I'm reorienting some of the slides. But like when I talked about Septoria recently in Missouri, for example, I took some of these slides here. So these are all they belong to a group of fungi that are not necessarily related by lineage, but are related in what they do and how we as growers articulate them. So they're called leaf spot fungi because they make a spot in their leaves, right? So um,
I take it this is all outdoor.
it's definitely something that I don't see often in indoor. That's right.
Yeah.
Dude, that looks like Colombian outdoor plants.
Yeah, exactly right. So Septoria, if you've never seen, for people who've never seen it before,
Fucking flesh
at
eater's
least,
disease for plants.
yeah, basically, yeah, leishmaniasis or like leper
Yeah.
disorder,
Ugh.
leprosy. So you've got necrosis in the middle here. This is leaf tissue that was already used up and eaten, and you've got spore producing structures that are in here basically. And then as it expands outward in a radial way, you get this like chlorosis, and that is the fungus working currently, And so this will become brown. The yellow will become brown, right? And these are different examples of people who've got leaf spot fungi of different kinds. If I go back, it's not just Septoria, it's Alternaria. there's another groups like Bipolaris and Cercospora and Anthracnose, which some people have heard of before, and a bunch of other ones which I'm not going to name here. So, but these are all leaf spot fungi, and probably, perhaps, several of these, actually all of these have been found in cannabis. Different species of, maybe only one species in different genera. These are all different groups of species. Um, but yeah, if that makes sense. So, like for example, this Septoria cannabis species that they found here, that they have here in this example from this report from Kentucky, it's the brown lesion, yellow circle that I was talking about earlier. You mostly get it on the bottom of the leaves as it starts coming out from the substrate,
From the splashback.
from the splash, exactly.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Just
And
climbing the plant and decimating it.
that's what your friends were trying to avoid too.
Oh, trust me, I know. With
Right.
like thousands of plants.
And so, like, for example, if you were trying to look at, because people always ask me, well, what plants should I, well, companion plant or not companion plant? What should I use? And this is all speculative. I want to be really responsible and put myself away from the competition and other peers by saying we don't all know the answers. Because we don't. But like, if you were to look at Septoria cannabis speculatively, and you were to look at species that are closely related to it, this is like a phylogenetic tree, which basically means that they're looking at the relationship, the evolutionary pathway, somewhat, of different species and how they correlate with other relatives that are closely related. So you can see here in this sort of line graph that you've got Septoria can possibly a different species altogether, which we could get into, called Neo Cannabina. But the taxonomy for Septoria is so uh, chaotic that I don't think anyone really knows right now if this is a different species or if it's the same species or something like this, because that stuff happens a lot. So getting away from all that stuff, you can see that Septoria cannabis is closely related to these other species here, this calendulae, this Violi palustris, this Septoria siegsbeckii. So those are Septorias of that colonize calendula, which are marigolds. Um,
I found another joke for you while you're doing this.
Good. I want to hear it.
When you're reading through those crazy names and you're like calendula, viola, add cocksuckerus.
Yes.
It's like that. Is it like Parks and Recreation where the guy was like, I just use rappers' names for my plants. Like, oh, look at those ludicrouses. They're really blue and really nice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, scientists make some really so you think that's a joke, but you're actually hundreds of years old for it because I challenge you to find what the Venus flytrap's scientific name
Yeah,
is
right.
and what it means, um, or orchids for that matter, and what their nomenclature refers to, and how that has to do with Greek and ancient Roman society. You can just have fun with that one. But
Oh, tell
yeah,
us about
for
the
me,
Venus flytrap. Wait a second. Don't. Don't so what's the deal with that?
well, it's a euphemism for something that's not YouTube appropriate.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yes, so that's where the scientific name comes from. And for orchids, it
Tippity
refer
twitch it.
yes, it refers to the same reason why we say testament in English, if you want to look at the etymology of that word. So, anyways,
You know what another nickname for it is? The meadow clam.
that's right. So calendulae, marigolds, right? Maybe you don't grow those near a cannabis. And then this Siegs Beckier, this is St. Paul's wort. So like warts, wart plants. If you have those around, if you're able to find what those are. Oh, Etienne, were you saying something? Oh, okay, sorry. You were muted, but I still paid attention.
I
Um,
was saying so when you said wart, I went at St. John's wort, so yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So like these might be plants, these marigolds, these violets, viola is violet. So if you have some of these plants nearby, maybe be a little extra cautious, or if they're on your property, if you're a home grower or a commercial grower, this might be a vector point speculatively. I just wanted to say it that way. But
Someone
like
in cannabis is going to see that as a gauntlet throwdown. They're going to be like, I'm going to start a greenhouse of marigolds next to my greenhouse of cannabis. Fuck Matthew and fuck Hash
yes.
Church.
You know what? You know
Okay.
what? Add to the scientific, information and make a study about it. That's how I will definitely support that 100%. Let's find out.
When I first went to Rubicon Organics, it's a organic greenhouse grow here in Canada. And on either side of this greenhouse, right, they got like their 5 acres or whatever, and then there's 5 acres next to them on one side and 5 acres next to them on the other side, and it's raspberries and blueberries. And these are extremely sprayed crops. These are extremely like, they get powdery mildew, they get all sorts of different things. And I just thought, wow, like that is kind of a crazy place to grow wheat, but they seem to pull it off. I don't see them spraying or any of that. And another scientist. It's a scientist kind of day here on Hash Church. How's it going, Jeff?
Oh, good. Wait a minute. Hang on a second. There we
You
go.
did it.
Sorry.
You pulled it off. We're just Matthew was just presenting on all things powdery mildew and bugs and septoria and just interesting. I don't know if you've ever met Matthew, the sink angel. He's the bug guy. You guys know each
Hi,
other?
Matthew.
Hello.
My name is Jeff. I'm a chemist. I don't think I have met you before.
So we met.
I don't think so.
We met Jeff through Dr. Mark. Dr. Mark brought Jeff on to
Hey,
Hash
Jeff.
Church, and I just met Jeff in person for the first time in Massachusetts, like walking around the corner.
Before me
He's-
and Mark met.
I know, he's just standing there, just like looking at me, kind of the way I was looking at him. Like, dude, that guy looks like I know him.
Yeah, yeah. I really didn't expect to see you there.
You really didn't. You were definitely surprised to see me.
Yeah.
You're like, why are you here? I'm like, it's a cannabis event, man. What do you mean? Like, this is what I
know.
do.
It's a long way from Vancouver. But hey, all right. So yeah, it's good to see you, Professor Mark. Good to see you, Etienne.
Hey, good to see you. We'll see
right,
you in
and,
just a couple days, right?
Oh,
That's correct. Yeah, that's
Nice.
correct. I will be at MJ Unpacked. I have been working hard on my preparations. The fabric arts are a harsh mistress, and I have been preparing some fresh pants for the event.
For those of you who don't know, Jeff wears tie-dye pants.
Oh, I know. Trust me.
see.
Not just tie-dye pants.
So I'm yeah. So I've handmade my batch. I tried to work in the colors. This is challenging because a lot of the like MJ Unpacked media. Oh, that's great. A lot of the MJ Unpacked media is like purple and orange, which are difficult colors to use together.
Are you making them yourself?
Yeah.
Listen,
yeah.
you should reach out to Forrest, who was a regular on Hash Church. He had a son he's got a son who had epilepsy, still has epilepsy. Caladrius Network. Forrest is absolutely on another level with his tie dyeing. It is dude. I've been trying to get a tie dye from this guy for like years, just for my son. I'm like, dude,
He has a Wade tie dye, right? With
I
Wade.
know.
Yeah.
Dude, the Wade laughter tie-dye with Wade's face, I was just like, oh my God, dude, this is so good. So yeah, I will gladly link you
That's
up
cool.
and maybe he can just, a 5-minute conversation, give you a couple of tips and tricks and
That's cool.
send you on your way. I feel like you can follow SOPs. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that sounds fun. Right on.
So
yeah.
Jeff, tell everybody about the panel that we're going to have down in Atlantic City here.
Oh yeah, yeah. So we'll be having a panel with the title "Cannabinoid Synthesis from Safety Risks to Drug Discovery." I believe I may have minorly butchered that, and I've been putting together the slides for it. I basically. This is going to be fun for me because I really don't have to do that much. Everyone else gave me slides, and then I'm just weaving them together into a slideshow. And the whole panel is just going to be Professor Mark and Dr. Chris Hudalla from Proverti Labs. And it's going to be Tesphasian now from Colorado or from
Sunflower Wellness.
Sunflower Ther right, yeah, right.
Wellness, yeah.
Am I right? Sunflower Wellness?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
he's
Thank you.
subbing
Yeah.
in for Wes, right?
Subbing in for Wes. Yeah,
Wes
yeah.
Cruces
So
was going to come.
yeah, yeah. So I've been practicing this lineup with Wes Cruces in it from Colorado Chromatography and Sunflower
Right.
Wellness, is it? Yeah.
Sunflower
All right.
Wellness, that's right.
All right. Trying not to butcher names here.
They now have a new company called Blackstone Therapeutics, right?
Yeah, yeah, they got Wes has a lot of companies, and I don't know, like I think some of his, some of these other folks that work with him are affiliated with some of the companies, but not like I don't
Right.
know. I was gonna get to ask him more about it while I was at MJ Unpacked, but unfortunately he had a untimely family emergency and couldn't join us. So we have Tesfaye. And anyway, yeah, so we'll start out talking about natural cannabinoids, and we'll just introduce like some chemistry concepts and like kind of the mirror images of the molecules, stuff like that. And then we'll talk about the structural variation of cannabinoid molecules and what you can do and which structural modifications you need chemistry for and what some of those results are, how you get new functions out of cannabinoid molecules from chemistry. So, and we'll talk about the risks, how hard it is to purify synthetic cannabinoids often, and some of the and we'll even Professor Mark is going to get to show off his trick for how to make completely pure delta 8 THC.
Yeah. In case you want to know, in case the world
Yeah.
needs to know,
In case
right?
the world
If you
needs to know
guys
how to
want
make
Delta
pure.
8,
But actually the world does need, like, if you want to understand
Right.
if you want to understand the pharmacology of these molecules, this is really hard thing about cannabinoid is
well, I guess
think
that
the way pharmacology is done is understanding single molecules and then understanding their synergies one on one. But with cannabinoids, man, the complexity of the mixtures is usually so high that it's very challenging.
Is it
It's
that-
the emergent properties we were talking about earlier. I'd made the point that like
Yeah.
more is different, like the physicist says. I'm forgetting his name. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's in my presentations. I always mention him because you can't tell like how a tidal wave works or a creek works or how an ocean works from looking at like a teardrop or looking at
Right.
a molecule of H2O or simply hydrogen and oxygen, right? You could figure that out. More changes it, right? And so cannabinoids,
Mhm.
obviously, right? Physiologically.
Yeah, you're at a point where the mixture is complex enough that it can sometimes be challenging to interpret what's happening.
Yeah, or what could
Right?
happen,
Or to
what's likely
compare experimental results between different studies because they have different batches and you don't know what impurities are
Yes.
there in each one, right?
That's a really good point.
And comparing anything clinical to the real world also. So
Yeah.
Cannabis is a tough one, man. It's not like it's not like simple drugs.
Can I ask some questions? Is anyone here familiar with CBDV? CBDV? Yeah, right.
I
Because
know
I read a
I
study.
know the structure.
Yeah, okay, because I read a study about CBDV being so plants that had high CBDV in them that they studied versus those that did not, proportionally, they were less um, good hosts for cannabis aphids, which was interesting to me, especially since they're specialists. So you would think that, and maybe they resist all the other cannabinoids. Fine, maybe this is a novel thing. Maybe it's more novel than the other cannabinoids. I don't know. But it was interesting because I was like, well, what would be, and we have you here on, so it might be the best time to ask this question, which was like, if speculatively, I know there's maybe not a lot of research on it, but like, what are some maybe benefits of CBDV? If I could ask such a, nubile question, or like maybe like what would be some cool things you like about the structure or the pharmacology if you know anything about that, because it might be cool for other reasons.
Yeah, yeah. So CBDV it's like a homolog of CBD.
Okay.
So what that means is that there's a tail part on the molecule that's a little shorter on the
Is
CBDV.
that the varinic
Um,
acid? Because
That's right.
I
That's
was
yeah,
correct.
asking
that
my,
derives from yes, what they call the
Right.
varinic acid. Yes.
okay, okay.
Yeah, the CBDVA is yeah, right. See, synthesized. Well, all right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, yeah. So there will be putatively, the CBDV is coming from CBGVA,
Okay.
right? Which is
Okay.
synthesized from the varinic acid. Yeah. So,
Yeah. I couldn't find very
yeah.
much about what the varinic nature of it is. Like also there's THCV, right? Yeah, so like
So
Yeah.
what does
I don't know.
Well, I don't think
CBG?
we really know everything about the pharmacology of CBD yet, right?
No.
Okay,
Like the
Or
I think
FDA
more
hesitates to
CBDV?
regulate it because it's so complicated. But also, like one of the challenges is that again, like this is actually kind of in a way comes back to the same thing about why our knowledge is so limited. That
okay.
like a lot of the studies done with CBD, right? Even many medical studies may have been done with CBD that was not 100% pure. And if
Ooh,
there was
yeah.
small amounts of THC in it, that could have had a big impact on the results, without it being accounted for. So, yeah, I feel like
It's never
our
accounted for in that sense because I remember when CBD really became a thing, and then people would get like CBD dominant flower and they would call it CBD. Just
yeah,
like today, everyone's calling
Yeah.
volatile organic compounds terps. It's like, well,
Sure.
yeah,
some of them, maybe the majority, but not all of them.
Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah. They could be terpenes, terpenoids, or some of them derive from other synthetic pathways, right?
Yeah,
So,
thiols and phthalates
um,
and esters and
yeah, right.
aldehydes.
Yeah, so they could be in some cases totally different. So, um, anyway, yeah,
Would we
it's
expect the longer tail to make it maybe reside longer in a receptor potentially? That's about the extent of my biochemistry knowledge, so I'm
well,
really scraping the barrel here.
I think actually usually
Yeah,
the
size of that tail
the
matters, right?
structure,
Okay,
yeah,
right?
that does
Yeah.
matter, but the structure activity relationship is generally that the binding constant, I guess generally speaking, the binding constant increases. So it actually binds
With a
tighter
longer
the longer
tail.
the tail.
Right.
And but
Well,
also,
and
you know,
something happens between C5. So like
yeah,
so
but the way
THC
it tags,
THC is a partial agonist at CB1, but
mhm.
THCV with the two carbon shorter side chain is an antagonist. So yeah, so you could change the pharmacology just based on
Yeah, so
the
Just a
size of
couple of
that
carbons.
tail.
Wow.
yeah, there can be a
But
lot of differences.
CBDV is completely different because again, it's a CBD and THC have very different pharmacology,
Yeah,
and
CBD and
so
THC have extremely different shapes. They're
so it
actually
is
like the two,
yeah.
like CBD is the most, yeah, it's a pretty exceptional cannabinoid actually compared to many of the others in terms of like the sh like how kind of chunky it is, I would say, and also yeah,
Well, there's free
it's
rotation about those
yeah,
that
yeah,
bond, right,
it's
Jeff?
Is
So
right,
because of the
there?
yeah,
free
yeah. So,
rotation,
but it's gonna, yeah, but it's gonna prefer to mostly sit in a state where it's like this, basically, where the two parts of the molecule are almost 90 degrees
orthogonal
to each other.
to one
Oh,
another.
really?
Whereas the
Okay.
THC molecule is allowed to lay way flatter. I mean, it's not flat, but it's way flatter.
I
Um,
Yeah.
see.
and so that changes a lot. And so the funny thing about these cannabinoid receptors is that their mode of action is also not like the most simple like lock and key picture that we learn from our like introductory biochemistry course because it's not direct the interaction is generally speaking directed by hydrophobic interactions which are
Oh,
less locally specific than the interactions of really polar functional groups, which tend to be very specific and directing. So each molecule, depending on how its structure, hits the receptor a little differently and does something a little different to it. Like as Professor Mark is saying, like to the point where even like the category of activity changes in some
I
cases,
like how in
right?
chemistry truth is truth, and we don't get upset at the
Yeah.
oh, you're hydrophobic. How dare you treat water like that?
Yeah.
No, it's not a belief system. This is just a thing that's occurring in nature. It's just,
Well,
yeah,
hydrophilic.
hydrophobic,
There's a yin and there's a yang there, right?
as
And
there
Right.
it's
should
kind of
Yeah,
be.
like one has to be there to counterbalance the other. And
yeah.
I
so,
think
like,
I've read that
so
hydrophobicity. Oh, yeah, keep going.
I was just gonna say CBD, which isn't a CB1 binder, right? It's a negative allosteric inhibitor, changes the activity of THC. So, like a full spectrum of medicine that has both CBD and THC, the THC is going to work different at the receptor. And I think the same pairing is true with CBDV and THCV. So CBDV, similar to CBD, hits the trip receptors. It hits GRP 55, and
Mhm.
it's so interesting because if you look at the number of pharmacological relevant receptors that these things hit. The acids hit different than the
Very
decarboxylated.
differently.
CBD
Yeah.
hits different than THC. And now what we know is that CBG, in fact, CBGA is very different than the THC and CBC. Or yeah, and then yeah, I ignored CBC in that discussion, but this again, Jeff, right? If the cannabis plant teaches us anything, it teaches us the activity is not a single active ingredient, which is used to what the FDA regulates, right? Single active
Yeah.
ingredient in a matrix of whatever,
This is
aspirin,
a fair challenge, right?
right?
As Professor
Multiple
Mark is
active
describing,
ingredients.
each ingredient is also hitting multiple different receptors and systems, and often in ways that we don't completely understand yet,
Yeah. No, we
right?
don't.
Because like these biochemical pathways, I mean, they're so complicated. And they're also they're spectacularly redundant. They
Yeah.
have
They
feedback
have to
loops
be, I
on
think.
feedback loops. A bunch of them don't really do much of anything most of the time because other stuff compensates for them so much, like because there's so much redundancy. But then everyone, they don't all have like designed and intended functions
Yeah,
as
it's
we like to think, right?
earlier I was describing like
Some
powdery
are
mildew.
vestigial.
Yeah,
Right.
as like for example, like some of these pathogens have evolved. Some of them were like good guys, basically. Long story
Sure.
short, and they had certain abilities to communicate with the plant and exchange nutrients, but then they lost control of their ability to regulate, and then they became parasites over time because they found that they could just kind of, well, this is just speculative, but they could just kind of extract the nutrients and
Well,
didn't have to worry about the exchange part, and then that over time, that really radically changed how they interact with that physiology. It's kind
yeah.
of
Well,
interesting.
if some, right, you can think of it as like if some in that population developed some parasitic behaviors and that helped them reproduce more,
Right,
then
exactly.
that's it,
That's
right?
ecological
And
success. That increased
all
it.
they need is some tiny edge, and then then now they're a parasite, and now they're evolving better and better parasitism, right? But a good
Exactly.
parasite that's successful doesn't kill its host too fast, right?
Which is powdery mildew. It's
Yeah,
rarely
yeah,
lethal to the plant. It's not great
yeah,
for us.
exactly.
It really messes with us, but it doesn't
Because
really
if it
kill
kills
the
the host
plant.
right away, how's it reproduce? Where's it go?
Exactly.
How's that pan
Exactly.
out?
Not very
Right.
well.
I mean, so
Yeah.
some of them, I mean, probably there were some individual, there's some probably powdery mildews that will kill a plant right away, but they just don't ever reproduce. So you never see them.
Yeah,
Right.
or at least not as much. Yeah, it's crazy stuff, but like, over time their genes change or you get like bacteria. I was talking about there's a yeah, the bacteria, some of the most core bacteria in aphids
Mhm.
that aphids need to like break down the sugars in their body
Yeah.
and give them the nutrients and synthesize nutrients that they lost the ability to synthesize.
Mhm.
Um, it was E. coli. It was an E. coli. It was closely related to E. coli, and then over time, as it became a symbiont, it basically like all of the genes that weren't important, that were important for its like free living form, those go away. And like you said
Yeah.
about redundancies in genes, like some of them stayed, and Mueller's ratchet is cranking that, cranking
Yeah.
that change. But over time, the genome it basically becomes like a like endosymbiotic, like
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
mitochondria or something.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's
It becomes like an organelle almost, right? Like,
exactly,
yeah, it's
exactly,
so
and they
funny,
are
right? And
intracellular.
when
They
you
are
see
intracellular.
and when you see the frequency with which stuff like that happens, like it's very
Yes,
fascinating to appreciate like how varied and diverse evolution is, the way that like yeah, species can in a way sometimes species can almost merge, right? Or I mean they become
yeah,
very co-adapted. Um and there's so much potential locked up in there and all those redundancies and vestigial traits and stuff like that, right?
I
Those are
agree.
all things that can become activated later. And that's why you see all these, I mean, you just see so many patterns repeated again and again and again in nature.
So true,
Um,
so true.
yeah, that's very cool.
Isn't it? Yeah, there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot you can draw out of that. Not only just practically helpful to know, in the grand scheme, but also metaphorically, I think there's a lot of interesting, I don't like
That's a
narrativization in
beautiful
science.
compliment.
I'm really against it. I try not to do that kind of thing because I don't want to introduce like a weird human bias or something and like what we understand, but it can be kind of spiritually beautiful in a way to like look at how interconnected these things are and some of these the physics of some of these interactions and to take some meaning out of it. Like for me, the idea that just by close association, an organism can go from one end of the spectrum, mutualism, or perhaps the middle of the spectrum, just simple commensalism, to one or the other, and then switch between them, or even make versions of themselves in the case of microbes that are all along across the spectra. That's
Mhm.
all kind of cool. And it shows that, like, yeah, the world is very complex and we can't just simplify it.
Or at least not always. I mean,
Not always, yes,
the
yeah. Where we
simplifications
can,
that we
maybe.
that's what makes the simplifications that we can make so powerful.
Yes,
But
exactly.
but it's
I think
also
that's eloquently put. Yes.
it's also why I was like definitely nervous when politicians started saying you gotta trust the science.
Oh,
I was like, whoa, just a second. I don't know much
that
about
was
science, but
actually
I'm pretty sure we're just not, we don't
Does
trust
the science
anything.
trust the science? Yeah,
no,
exactly.
we're still paying the price for that. I feel like scientists in America are still paying the price for the politicization of science.
It's terrible, dude. Absolutely terrible. It should be remaining neutral. It should have no, I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. Look, there's lobbying and there's money and there's dollars, and that's always going to try to affect things. And obviously, from a scientific standpoint, it's a lot better when you're funded and you have money and
Yeah.
people are giving you money to do the work that you need to do. But holy fuck, is there a level of corruption that can be involved in that? Well, that we clearly all saw, right? We saw it. It was pretty
Well,
pretty
Yeah,
that's
and
noticeable.
I get worried about there's a lot of commercial incentive now. Scientists are much more encouraged to develop patents from their research and then spin off
yes.
companies. And I think that can be great sometimes. I think it can be good to hustle. I'm not totally anti-capitalist, but I have noticed how that can give us a bunch of that sometimes that can give us half-baked ideas that get hurriedly deployed and they actually do harm to our society. I mean, I believe that we're partly like we're reaping the rewards of what people proposed to be an education boom because of new educational research and science, and they brought a bunch of screens and computers into classrooms. Definitely COVID helped, but there was a big research industry complex around it also. There were lots and lots of grants to support education innovation. And so people came up with all these, apps and screen things and stuff like that. And now our kids are dumb and they can't work in the real world. So,
Unmute myself. I'll add to another part of that. So after I take this bong rip.
do it.
Heroin.
Well, I'm in the education business,
Yeah.
and
Well, then you
Yeah,
have a
okay.
very big responsibility, Dr. Mark.
I'm
You gotta
sending
you gotta be one
to
of the cool ones. You gotta fucking,
yeah.
get through to
So
the young people.
a week from today, I won't be on Hash Church because I'll be attending commencement at St. Michael's College where I teach.
That's
You
amazing.
know, and I tell you what, guys, it is just, as a professor, when you watch those kids go across that stage and get their diploma and know that, you were part of the, educational system that sent this student into the world, those students are going to remember me for the rest of their life.
For sure.
And they're going to remember. Jeff knows this. I took two of my students to the ACS meeting this year, and man, I tell you, Jeff, that was just the biggest rush in the world, man. Just
Mhm.
watching my students stand in front of their posters at the ACS meeting as Professor XYZ walks by, right? Oh, tell me about your poster, tell me about your research, and there I am watching from afar, you
Yeah.
know, and I tell you, Mark, you're right, and Jeff, you're right in a way that we've raised this internet age kids who have internet in their pocket, which is a really powerful tool, and all of these tools, AI, you know, I have to be able, as a professor, I have to be able to look at a lab report and understand, is it real? Or is
Yeah.
it AI? Like, did they just go to fucking Chat GPT and say, "Oh, here's the lab report question. How many moles of calcium chloride? Blah 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 blah." Right, and just have some AI spit out answer, and I have to read. Some of these questions are. It's not just like a value like 38.5. There's an essay question, right? Like one of the essay questions was, why are we adding why are we adding uh, hydrochloric acid to the solution of sodium benzoate? And what we were doing is we were separating, doing acid-base extraction, separating sodium benzoate, which is now water soluble. Now, when they add the acid, holy shit, this benzoic acid precipitates out. They isolate it by filtration. I mean, part of it is just like there's that aha moment of learning that, again, as a professor, you like to be around the students and you like to be able to guide them into how do you solve problems in the world. Certainly like learning all the elementary aspects of chemistry, physics, and math. Yeah, super, super important. But if you can't translate it into a career where, say, you're looking at, I don't know, if you're working at a grow and you're looking at feeding schedules, or if you're using AI, I'm seeing AI being used, Marcus, you've probably seen this too, in the grow, right? So people are looking at like
We did a
everything.
whole Grow AI show just a couple
We
episodes ago
we
with
did.
Smart Grow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, with those guys. So I was visiting a grow just the other day, and I looked at their system, and yeah, they're using AI. I tell you, man, I mean, to me, it's like, yeah, there are these tools that exist today, but do you still need, like, just because you have a smartphone plus dumb person is dumb output. You need smart person, smartphone. Smart person and smartphone could now be. So I guess what I mean to say is that it's a tool, right? And like any tool, you have to be able to use it in a productive way, but you still need to have the human element of input and creativity. So when I'm
Course.
looking at like one of these lab reports and it's just cut and pasted right out of Chat GPT, you should see it, Jeff. I mean, again, we're like calculating moles, calculating, yields and rates and stuff like that. You could easily program that out of AI. But if you get the wrong, like if you don't understand difference between first order rate constant and second order, and you build the AI model wrong, you're going to get a wrong answer. So you still have to know enough chemistry going into using AI in order for you to use it productively in a way that it actually makes sense. I don't know. Is that all making sense? Kind of like, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think also, I mean, you got like people still need to be able to do stuff with their hands. Right? You got to be able to figure stuff out sometimes, right? Like the real world's messy. So,
Well, you
that
said it,
that
Dr.
was a
Mark.
lot of
It's a
what I was
tool.
seeing. But there was a lot of what I was seeing towards the end of my time. I was teaching lots of labs, And I've seen
Yeah.
students come in who can't turn a screw, they can't, like, they don't know what a Phillips head is. They kind of, their hands are just soft and weak. I don't know. They just, it's like you say, like, I mean, they say, like, oh, I can't tighten this clamp anymore. You just go over, it's just like, what? You just turn
Dude,
it.
listen,
They're like,
I
oh,
saw a side-by-side picture of what a man looked like 40 or 50 or 60 years ago versus today, like a 25-year-old man. And the
yeah.
25-year-old man from like 50 years ago or whatever is ridiculous, dude. Like full crazy hairy chest, big density, just big, like full mustache. Like it's testosterone. That's it. You put a lot of that shit in, you get manly men. You take it
You
out.
just described me, Mark. What's
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go. Well, they put a picture of a 25-year-old guy next to him, and he was like super skinny, didn't have a lick of hair on his
I'm all
body.
hairy on my chest.
I bet you are, dude. Dr.
Some
Mark
of this is
rocking
other
tea.
genetics, but
There might be some other genetics at play.
Absolutely.
Well, I heard, I've been hearing, and I'm not like not like a milk, dairy supremacist or something like some people I see out there in the world, but like apparently there's like I was reading about a correlation being really high with people who are taller, maybe larger built, and their consumption of milk, but not just their consumption of milk and milk products, but that they come from peoples who, are not lactose intolerant and have been doing that for a long time. So it's like the diet buildup over time plus the gene adaptations to that equal, this. But you have to have both. You can't just like start drinking milk and you'll get like all of the benefits, right? Like there's a
some body types aren't going to use it as well, or going to
100%,
get sick
or
from it.
other foods for that matter, right? Yeah. So
Well,
like
they're going
when
to
I
get
was in
kidney
Romania,
stones, right?
I
From
was
all the calcium.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I was visiting my in-laws in Romania, and they love to eat like milk products and like especially like spoiled milk product yogurts and these sorts of things where there's a controlled yielding of the dairy product to make something else, and I just couldn't handle it, man. It's not
Yeah,
my
but when
thing.
you go to this one area of old Soviet Georgia, the life expectancy is well over a century mark, and one of the things they attribute it to is the yogurt and the cultures in the yogurt. There's one other area it's really interesting, Matt, is in Japan, where there's high consumption of green tea, and they believe it's the polyphenolics from green tea that's keeping people alive so much, right? So I don't know, man. I mean, I
Yeah, I
think
don't know.
a big piece has to
When
do
you're studying
with your
populations of
genetics.
people, when you're studying
Yes.
populations of people like that, it's so complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is,
Everyone
but
always
it's
likes to say
curious.
it's this or that ingredient, but I'm always like, yeah, I don't know.
Well,
There's
I
a
was
lot.
just gonna say,
Yeah.
is it just as like
I like that.
it's most likely this intense combination of everything. And
Well, yeah.
sure, the thing that's a
Well,
part of it
yes.
is a part of it, but it has to be everything.
Yeah,
But
because they're like
that's why we
these
grow
isolated
plants and then say
populations are often not.
these are my
Yeah.
CBDs. This is CBD. It's like that doesn't look like CBD isolate. No, it's my CBD cultivar. I'm like, right, but why would you just choose the one thing to call it? Like isn't it
Yeah.
a variety of things? Yes. I think the human mind, if the most is a certain thing, we automatically call it that. That's what it is, right? That's why everything's terps, because terpenes are in full percentages and thiols and these other compounds
we need
are in.
the simplicity sometimes.
We
It's
do.
Sometimes,
It's
yeah.
exhausting
I
to
think-
list all of this.
Yeah, I do.
I have word
mean,
limits on my articles
it's
sometimes.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Like,
Don't I know it? Yes, exactly.
I think honestly, stuff like this is built for these analytical scientific minds that would otherwise, I mean, honestly, probably jump off a cliff if they didn't have the mental gymnastics to perform with the
These are
deep
the-
dive of the shit they were jumping into. Could you imagine? Like, what the fuck would you guys do? Okay, you're
I
not
mean,
allowed
I
to-
like to think that I come from a long line of like the guys who knew all the berries and which ones you were supposed to and not supposed to eat.
Yeah,
right?
dude. Pretty important.
Written in blood and maybe other fluids. that
Talk
we
about a
shouldn't talk about
valuable
on YouTube.
lesson. Hey, when someone dies, all right, write that. Take that one off the list. Bob
Yeah.
died. It's like,
Thank you for your
oh,
service. You.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
am not sure if Mr. Smith is going to be making it in, but I did invite Ted Smith. He's got some pretty crazy shit going on with his Compassion Club in Vancouver. They're still harassing this guy. They've just been like, so he wanted to come on and have a conversation about milligrams and limitations in Canada and why, although there's stores, there's still a reason for his club to exist, which is to offer high milligram dose THC to his clientele, to his patients. So he said he was going to come in around 11, so we can continue our conversation. I just was kind of forewarning you guys that I'm going to leave. He posted the other day saying, if anyone has podcasts they can invite me onto, I'm trying to get this message out. And Ted's such a fucking good human being, like truly a good human being. He has been doing what he's been doing like for 30 plus years, nonstop, unrelenting, like just getting stomped. Like I think they sued him for $2 million a couple years ago. They've probably arrested him 30 times at least. He's probably gone through every bank and credit type what do they call them, unions, credit unions. They're like banks in Canada, but they're kind of below banks. Anyway, I'm sure he's gone through all of them. Kind of Etienne's story, but down here in Canada. And not that Ted's not as effective as getting his message out as Etienne, but he has just been, he doesn't have the whole thing running the way Etienne does. Like he is there all the time, every day doing that. So he can't really get away, but he's a great dude. And I hope he does come in and share with us about, his trials and tribulations. I thought it was a great segue to go from the bugs and pests into the pests and government. It's like different types of pests. And then Jeff rolled in and I was like, oh my God, he's going to be able to speak to both sides of this. This is going to be so good. So let's continue with our bugs, Matthew, and the science that we've been talking. But just know that when Ted comes in, we're going to shift because I may keep Hash Church 3 hours today. I'm trying to hit up Blackcomb for the last day that I'm going to be able to hit it, or second last day. Got friends up there, and it would be a breeze in 56 minutes if I could bounce out of here and go do that. So
absolutely
continue with the bugs.
Sure.
Ted, if you're listening, come in when you feel it.
Yeah, I mean, like I like to make that joke a lot that I usually specialize in pests that are not bipedal, but for those kinds of pests, you have different solutions as well. And I think in a lot of ways, the same kind of outlook, be very holistic, have multiple options at your disposal, because they're also very sophisticated in what they can and can't tolerate. So yeah, I'm down. Um, let's see. Oh, I have two of these things. Oh, well, here's a cool thing. I'll immediately get into. Um, since we were talking about Septoria beforehand, I'll just mention that a really cool thing about I guess in a way, a really important point is that Septoria cannabis samples have been around for a long time in the USA. About 142 years ago, in 1882, 89, and 1891, we have samples of Septoria cannabis in Kentucky specifically. So my father is from Kentucky, and people were growing hemp for all kinds of reasons, and cannabis too, and all that stuff. And there's been a lot of time, to make this point, there's been a lot of time in history where some of these pathogens that are so common, we're just breaking the, barrier. We're just, looking at the top of the ice cap to see, what these relationships are like. But we might find that it's a lot more integrated, the Septoria and the cannabis, than we previously thought. And so, like we'll probably have this spear and shield dynamic, but then understanding exactly how pointy is the spear in the case of the pest and how how strong is the shield in the case of the cannabis. I think that will be really helpful for growers to make informed decisions about what to breed or how to grow in their region and that kind of a thing. I wanted to I guess I was talking about these products that weren't working against Septoria, right? So like I don't want to just say that that they don't work, and then it's like someone's like, oh well, I bought this product and it works, you're a liar, you don't know what you're talking about, Matt. Well, I mean, when we quantify it, when we have university professors go and and do research and look at not just cannabis, Septoria cannabis, as we see here in this C figure, but other ones too, like Botrytis. Like there was basically, total germination. I don't, you can't see this very well, but on the bottom of this graph here, we have all the different products. Um, and then we have products that you shouldn't use in cannabis, mostly. And yeah, not only did the mycelial growth, still, 15% is still better than control, which is 30%, but not that much, right? Not a huge difference. Maybe statistically significant in that way. But like if you're a grower, that might not be enough, if you lose 30% of your crop or maybe more because it's 30% growth, if you only retard it halfway, that just might not be enough is my point that I'm trying to make here. So these were the products that they used, and you can see that a lot of these are, like Trichoderma asperellum, Eulocladium, another biocontrol, Bacillus subtilis, various ones, QST713, someone had mentioned that earlier, I think. Bacillus amyloliquefaciens, Bacillus mycoides, even extract regalia, these are products, right? Regalia and extracts from Japanese knotwood, I believe, is what it is. All of these, and the amounts that they used, and the rates that they used, and the mode of action, all this stuff, and they weren't very effective. So I just want to make that point to people that like you might hear advertisements and claims that these biocontrols are working for Septoria, um, and maybe they do, maybe they will for you. It's possible. But I think it's also possible that at certain scales or in other certain contexts, it just might not be worthy enough, potentially. You might just not have, it might be too much money, too much application, and you won't get the benefit that you need. If it's like you need something that will kill everything really quickly, that might not be available currently, unfortunately. And so we talked about Septoria cannabis. And there's also like other ones with similar names like Septoria cannabicola from Japan here. This is the Mie prefecture in Japan. And on the right, we have a Köppen-Geiger climate map. So this is like how they articulate the different climates in Japan. If you didn't know, it gets pretty hot, pretty humid, especially in the summertime for the heat. Mie is in this like section right here. And this is a man named... what was his name? Oh, I can't see it because of the thing. Yeah, Mitsutaro Shirai, and he was classically trained, a Western trained pathologist, plant pathologist, one of the first in Japan. And here he is with some notes looking at some of these fungi. We might think in modernity that like they didn't have really good ways to look at these fungi, but look at these. Even with the microscopy from a long time ago, they were still able to like capture and write. And this is something in science that I kind of miss. People who were like drawing their own figures. You had to have, it was a craft to be a scientist, I think, in some ways. And I'd be curious to get Mark or Jeff's impressions about some of this too, in comparison. Obviously, it's not the same thing, and I'm happy that we have the sophistication that we have, but this was they called in Japan the Satori, they called it Taimashiro Boshibyo, or cannabis white star disease, which is kind of a poetic name. But yeah, these might be two totally different Septoria species in two totally different areas that have now, kind of traveled across the globe. And although they have similar capabilities, and as you can see here in the top left, sort of similar symptoms, they aren't totally identical. No, we're going to the botrytis section, but yeah, so that was just my little spiel about that section of Septoria and how it develops, and what are some of the considerations we might want to think about intellectually, highbrow, strategic, 30,000 foot sort of way. Like I just want people to be informed, basically.
Absolutely. Well, that was awesome, dude. And what, I've just been, since I announced that Ted was going to come on, what he'd be speaking on today, and how you were even like, oh, they're like the good bacterias, but then they take on these different, like how what you were talking about, powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is like good people who go into government and become a parasite. And that is who we are going to be talking about today,
Right.
with Ted Smith. It's so nice to see your face light up, because you had a very serious look when you came on, furrowed brow. I know you as a smiler. I know you're going through the shit, bro. As always, I can't believe it again. But it was so nice to see you smile when I told you my little metaphor. We've had Matthew, who specializes in bugs and spores and all these microscopic sort of parasitical like things that attack and harm cannabis. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to have Ted Smith come in and talk about the government version of those exact same things that are fucking with, you know, what you're trying to do in Victoria. So A, welcome. Great to see you, brother.
Hey, buddy.
B, you know, people know who you are, but it's still give a little lowdown, give a little 5-minute cliff note on Ted Smith and what Ted Smith's been doing for the last 30 years in Victoria. And then let's get into our conversation. And thank you for that presentation, Matthew. That was awesome.
Yeah, happy to help.
Oh, hey, Matthew.
Hey.
Hey, and thanks for having me on the show like this in such short notice. But yeah, it's been a little hectic lately. So yeah, backing up, I'm 7th-generation farmer on both sides in Ontario, and got a philosophy degree in university, and struck out west 30 years ago to make the world a better place, and stumbled across a group called Hempology 101. And so I started to do, you know, different educational things, write a book, have meetings. I moved to Victoria. The Hempology was started in Vancouver. And
Did you know that I was a part of Hempology?
You were part of the original group there?
Not the original group, but I came in and was always like, I supported and facilitated and made sure that I learned as much as I could from them as well. So it's pretty cool to hear you say that.
Yeah. I only went there for a couple months. It was January '95. I went to the first ones there. I think it was Terrapin Station was what Dana called her little apartment there on Hastings.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like, I think it was like by April, I was like, this is awesome. I need to expand this in Victoria. You know, the big city wasn't really my thing, but the island was just, you know, perfect for me. I could see. So that's pretty neat. I know a lot of people had their roots there. You know, I met Dana Larson there and helped write the business directory in the first Cannabis Canada, when it was, you know, the hemp and marijuana newsletter. And, you know, all those early, really amazing days were really quite something.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, so I came from that, got a van, moved to Victoria, got a pager and pamphlet. Oh, sorry, I met a woman that made cookies and brownies and volunteered in the AIDS community. And so I saw firsthand what eating cannabis did for people that were literally dying. It turned their lives around. Like, smoking cannabis was good for people with AIDS. It slowed things down. It could make them handle some of the cocktails they were being given at the time. But if they ate cookies, they'd put weight back on. They'd feel like living again. It was, you know, dramatic. And so that's what inspired me, with Dennis Perron and the San Francisco Cannabis Buyers Club, you know, leading the way. But literally, you know, it was such a new thing that I think I pretty much made the first mandate for what is medical, you know, in terms of requiring a diagnosis from a doctor of a serious medical problem. And so requiring a diagnosis fit within the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because when you have a serious medical ailment, you have the right to choose your course of medical treatment. So we've, you know, kind of built ourselves around the Charter in many ways, still do. And so, yeah, so got the club going in January 1996. Was still doing hempology at the time. Actually, 5 years later, I got busted at 420 up at UVic, passing out joints. And then downtown, I was giving out cookies and got busted with 420 cookies at a little protest I was doing, which just made the Buyers Club more popular. I got a storefront. We got raided 4 times in the storefront in 2002, 2003. Beat every single charge of the Buyers Club. I got a couple convictions for giving pot cookies out and stuff, but nothing major. 2009, my bakery got raided with Owen Smith.
That was a big one.
Right?
Fuck.
You provided pictures in our trial for that of the trichomes, because we had to explain to the judge the importance of trichomes. And you know, the analogy that our expert witness used was, you know, like having a maple tree, you know, be made illegal if a leaf falls out, or if you take the maple syrup out of the tree, essentially the government had said that the tree was legal, marijuana was legal when the marijuana regulations came in. But if you made an extract out of that, if you made hash out of that, then you had produced a drug. Even what broke the judge was a little old lady on the stand describing making tea.
That's right.
And that when she took the tea bag out, all of a sudden the remaining liquid
she was
a
facing
drug.
14 years.
So at that point, the judge realized the absurdity of it, and we won the Supreme Court of Canada unanimous decision. Made edibles and extracts legal for Canada, and really was the final straw on prohibition. Sadly, at the time, my love Gail was dying of cancer. I'd met a patient along the way, and she testified in that trial and watched it live online. But sadly, not enough cannabis in the world could save her life. So when she was dying and passed away, I left for a while, even from the industry entirely. Legalization sort of happened anyway. And then I went back to the club. And since legalization, we've been raided 4 times. We were evicted from our last location and face fines of, it was 3.2 million plus interest now. And so now it seems like they're coming after my girlfriend and I, our home. She was on the board of directors when we were fined. And the recent raid, sort of 2 weeks ago, it seems now they're coming after our landlord. So, yeah, it's been quite the long chain of events.
Dude, you are dealing with the worst case of human septoria that you could possibly have encountered. And so luckily we have mapped the IPM. What's that?
How long were you sitting on that when you were like,
like since yesterday, man? Come on, I have these all pre-done.
What an insult! Immediately, top of the lexicon for insults. You human septoria.
Yeah,
that sucks. That's so bad. I'm so sorry to hear about it.
I would also mention, when Ted mentioned his bakery being busted, that was really huge. Canada had a medical marijuana law. Marijuana, mariuana, was defined as like the buds and the structures, and so nothing else was legal. And it was the simple little old lady kind of like, so this is legal. My cannabis is legal. I bought it at the store. I throw it in a tea bag. It's still legal. I put it into the water. Still kind of legal. I pull it out. I've now done an extraction and I'm facing 14 years in prison. So how, when Ted says it ended up changing Canada wide, well, the judge was so brilliant, really. I got to give him like a standing ovation, because instead of going federal, he said, I only have the power provincially initially. And that provincial power, what he did was he defined marijuana as all things marijuana. Anything that came from the marijuana plant could be marijuana. So if you had a limitation of like 3 pounds, it could be the seeds, the stalk, the buds, the resin, the oil, the whatever. It's all just marijuana. And it was very soon after, because of that happening to Ted and them fighting it, BC, I don't know how short of a period of time was, but for the shortest period of time, we were the only ones that were allowed extracts. It was quite something.
It was a fascinating decision that had a number of impacts in different levels. One of the interesting things that happened was soon after we won the 2012 case, so the lower court decision that you're referring to, where it was like sort of BC only, where the rest of the country, it was persuasive, but it really wasn't law per se. So right after that, I had the Canada Revenue Agency come after me for uncollected and unpaid taxes. We weren't doing GST or employee deductions to that point. And so it was pretty amazing when they'd done this like investigation into me to find all my hidden money and realized that I actually have no money. I put everything back into the place and take as little as I need to live. And they were shocked because at the time it was quite busy. And when they came in, they were a little timid because they weren't sure, how we would react. And I was happy. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. You're telling me that the police aren't going to raid me anymore because I'm medical and that you just want your tax money now. I'm like, I'm turning this club into a nonprofit society and you're making this legit. And they're like, oh, no, we're not making this legit. We're just collecting our taxes. And I'm like, no, the day that you're here to collect your taxes and I'm not being arrested anymore is the day it's getting legit. And so we went public with that in the newspapers. And in 2012, that was when the proliferation of dispensaries hit Vancouver and Victoria, when everyone realized there was a margin of safety to operate. And it got to the point where the cities of Victoria and Vancouver and a few others even created bylaws and allowed licensing for these illegal stores. And that's when Harper was in charge. That's when he's pushing mandatory minimums. And despite that, there is this massive swell of civil disobedience that was, across the country. Like Alberta was one of the few provinces, and maybe a couple in the prairies, that didn't have open storefronts operating. But certainly Ontario, Quebec, the East Coast, there's more and more people every month, it seems, openly operating and defying the law, and having municipalities and people in positions of power turning a blind eye to it because they recognize that Health Canada's programs were fundamentally flawed by not allowing the alternatives that patients obviously needed. And so that impacted, the medical community, because they were forced to recognize that cannabis isn't just something that's smoked, because they could easily write it off when it was something that they thought was a smoked product. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it can be made into creams. It can be made into suppositories. It can be made into all these other products that they hadn't even tried to wrap their head around. So it bust that community open as well. And really, it was heard around the world. Like, we talk about how it affected Canada, and it did in a significant way. But, I've heard from people in Australia and certainly, other places where, this law in South America, really, was heard, and these changes, impacted far more than just our little club. That's for sure.
Unbelievable, super profound, absolutely, like reverberating out throughout the world. That was insane how many shops popped up. I feel like cannabis culture had 8 of them just like in Vancouver. Like, what?
Well, I know, and more in Ontario even, right? Like,
Yeah,
Ontario
exactly.
just exploded there.
Yeah,
It was
no,
pretty wild.
It was really wild.
That whole story is so funny because, like, I mean, when you smoke cannabis, you're also extracting the active ingredients.
Good point.
You could
Bingo.
call it a flame extraction if you want, You're
Paralysis or
right.
whatever.
Right.
It's full decarb and extraction. We're doing
Yeah,
both
all in one. How
simultaneously.
efficient.
Holy
right. And
shit.
then because I'm not consuming the flower, right? I'm sucking in the smoke.
Well,
Yeah.
it was
That's
fascinating in the trial. Our expert witness, Dr. Pate, and Kirk Tusaw, our lawyer, had an incredible exchange at one point, because Kirk's a bit of a cannabis nut too. And the Dr. Pate described how when a joint is burning, the heater actually
Is vaporizing.
first vaporizes or decarboxylates and then vaporizes the glands, the trichomes, long before the burning embers actually combust the plant material.
Yep.
And he was saying that as you inhale, you increase the temperatures, therefore hitting like all the different cannabinoids when you're changing the temperatures, as opposed to a vaporizer or something that has a very distinct temperature.
Mhm.
And I think I've also read about how like certain molecular weights of certain constituents in cannabis, like cannabinoids and some of the other metabolites, right? Like as you're in this particular, use case that you're demonstrating, deftly, that they kind of like move differently over time as you inhale. Some of them
That's
are
true.
heavier, some of them are lighter. Is that not true?
Some of
Yes.
that's true, and that's exactly the way to think about it, is that some of the molecules are heavier, and so they tend to be enriched in the roach,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. That's why I like it.
Compared
I
with
like it
their
at the very end.
concentration in the initial flower.
Oh, could you
So
say that again? I talked over you.
no, that's all right. Yeah. So, like if you look at the concentrations of all the compounds in the initial flower, then the roach is going to be enriched in kind of like the heavier compounds
Yes.
respect to the earlier with the previous one, and it's going to have much less of the lighter compounds. That's
Yeah, and
But molecular weight is like a pretty good general, it's not the only factor in
Right. Yeah.
volatility, but I mean, it's pretty good for
But when
this.
we're talking like in big numbers, right? It's like air is like water but less dense, right? It's still a fluid,
Mhm. Yep. Yeah.
system, so to speak. And I know a lot about that because the coolest thing about bugs, if for people who don't have an appreciation for insects, is that they're the first flyers. They're the first animals to have independent flight and not, you know, like they came from things in the ocean, right? That they were moving around in the ocean and now they're in the air and they made wings. And so I think it's kind of incredible that the things that were floating around in the dense air is now floating around in the less dense air. And,
Yeah.
yeah, so kind of neat.
I
But
like it.
yeah, but yeah, like in great amounts, right? That's a lot of chemicals moving around and all that stuff. So ideal gas law, all that stuff. Yeah. I know chemistry words too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Ted, bring us back to one of the main reasons we wanted to have this call, because now obviously there's all sorts of, I wouldn't say there's all sorts of medical, but there's some access through different platforms for people on computers and stuff. I don't know of any actual medical stores other than clubs like yourselves. But there's obviously lots of dispensaries. But there's still a reason to have this conversation, because one of the things the dispensaries can't really do, and I agree with this, because I have people all the time that reach out to me that are really sick, like stage 4, and they're just like, is there what, I'm just looking for hope. I always try to point them in the right direction without being like, look, I'm not a doctor or whatever, but I can tell you things that I've helped others do that they seem to, it seemed to help more than not. And so, what's I going with that? Oh, you need a large dose. Sometimes you need a large dose. I'm not a big doser. For me, like the 5 and the 10 milligram gummies that I can buy are great at the stores. And in fact, now my daughter's buying me bags that have 10 milligram gummies, which is 100, which is fine, but that is nowhere near what some people who find out they're sick too late. This is usually, and I hope you guys are really on the preventative trip there, Ted. Like, we try to get people to get to a point where if you're consuming smaller doses of cannabinoids while you're healthy, you may not get to a place where you have to eat like 8 or 900 or 1,000
Here.
milligrams in a
Yes, I
in a
love that.
day, because that's terrifying. Like even when the last person I gave it to was an elderly woman, and I was like, look, I'm not a doctor. Here is a doctor. I always give them like Dr. David Allen or some other person that I know that could potentially point them in a direction in a little safer manner than I do. But when people have lost all hope and they're in stage 4 and they're told to go home in palliative care and die, they're willing to do pretty much anything. But eating a gram of oil for 60 days in a row has got to be like the Ironman challenge of cannabis experiences. Like, that is no fucking joke. There's a reason why the only people who fucking do that are terminally ill, and God bless them, especially the ones that come out of it on top. But let's talk about limitations in edibles in Canada, Ted.
Okay, well, when we won our court decision, it was a fantastic moment. But Health Canada came out with this limit of 10 milligrams per product, and so that was pre-legalization. So when legalization came in, they just sort of adopted the same measurement, which is one that they've determined is enough for sort of a general healthy person to have an effect. Not necessarily a strong effect, but certainly something that is noticeable. Um, However, for a lot of patients in chronic pain, or patients fighting cancer, 10 milligrams doesn't cut it. And so that limit was one that we originally saw as the next challenge. We didn't know when or how, but we saw that needed to change for patients at least. And there was a review on the Cannabis Act a couple of years ago, and they considered changing that limit for medical or recreational, and they decided that for the safety of the children, they would not do so, which is really ironic because there's a lot of other really heavy, hard drugs that could kill children that are available. And so they just decided that in no form at all would cannabis be available in more than 10 milligrams.
Just the definition of virtue signaling, using children as a fucking shield while simultaneously prescribing the most deadly drugs on the planet. Often, if you know this about sickness, when you get really, really sick, and I'm not going to say exactly which disease they do this for. I believe Colton told stories of this very thing, where they give you all the medicines that were designed for what you have, but none of that works. So they start throwing the kitchen sink at you. They're like, well, let's give them some of the Parkinson's medications. Let's try this drug that we use for, restless leg syndrome. And they do this also to children. And I'm not judging them for doing anything it takes to keep children alive. That's not anyone that wants to care for people and children in my books, you're good. But the Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm. So it's strange, and it's what makes me not trust the sometimes hospitals and the sort of systems that hospitals operate in regards to my health. I just feel like, damn,
well, it's weird, right? Like
it doesn't add up.
They're acting like what you want to do is so crazy. And I mean, what you want to, and some of these doses are kind of crazy, right? But like, it's no crazier than the other shit we do, right?
Well,
I think that's
how about I can
right?
go
like,
buy a vat of Jack
and
Daniels
half
today,
it,
enough to
yeah,
kill my whole family.
Yeah.
People are doing lots of other totally crazy treatments at this stage. And so when everyone acts like, "Oh, you want to do this to kids though?" Then it's like, "What?" Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a lot. So yeah, speaking to the milligram limitations, obviously 10 milligrams is not enough for people in extreme pain, people that are like, they're trying to replace like Dilaudid and like oxys and fentanyl, like the hardest of the known painkiller drugs. Like, try to wrap your head around this. To me, these people fit into a category of what we should call some of the most vulnerable people in our society. They're in pain all the time. It would seem like the least we could do is not get in the way of them reducing that, particularly under the guise and virtue signaling and protecting fucking children. That's bonkers, man.
Well, this is why we're in a way shifting from the medical argument to the harm reduction argument, because a lot of our patients are trying to avoid using prescription drugs that often are more harmful to them, and so the doctors and medical community can argue about whether we can prove cannabis is better medicine or not, but we can prove that it's less harmful than the other options that are available to people. And just as harm reduction alone, cannabis should be like the number one tool in the toolbox for preventative medicines, because it can be used at sort of all three stages of harm reduction. It can be used to prevent people from using opioid drugs and painkillers in the first place. And I've known people to have surgeries using cannabis edibles and suppositories, and not take any opioids or few opioids to even have massive surgeries. It can also be used as a replacement for illegal drugs, more on the smoking end, but certainly combining smoking and eating high doses. A lot of people can stop using really heavy drugs, also and switch to cannabis. And then also for people that are using methadone, in a way that's just another substitute drug that the pharmaceutical industries are pumping into people. And if you can switch them from methadone to cannabis, then that's a big healthy step away from things that are not good for them.
Hey, when you can get a pure extract and you can smoke that like a crackhead, that will get you higher than crack. And I know that from a crackhead who I helped get off crack by giving him a big ball of bubble, locking him in his apartment. He had the pipe. He said 80% of his crack addiction was doing this and lighting a lighter and seeing it flicker. He said that was at least 80% of it. And he literally said at the end of about 7 days when he came out, he said that shit was stronger than crack. I said, well, yeah, you're not supposed to smoke it like crack, dude, but I'm glad it helped. I think an important factor on the edible conversation is that The only thing they could be upset about or worried about is a falsehood, which would be that people are going to consume edibles and drive cars and crash and do these things. Very different from alcohol and opioids for that matter, is that when people get too high on cannabis, instead of lying about how safe they would be to drive, they actually don't want to drive. They're going to make their case for it, and they're not going to drive. No one who gets too high on herb is going to be pressured into driving when they just don't really want to. Whereas when I was younger and I saw my friends getting drunk, they would fight you if you tried to take their keys away. Like, not only were they fine to drive, but they were willing to, throw your friendship under the bus and throw punches to prove to you how safe they were. Literally. So there's this delusion that's involved with some of these drugs that impair you, that really make you convinced you're not impaired. Almost, like PCP, when you forget that you've taken a drug, right? The disassociatives that you can take, where you get so high, but then you immediately forget you took a drug. I don't like those kind of drugs. Cannabis, on the other hand, you get super high, you're like, wow, I'm super high. I ate a bunch of cannabis, probably too high to drive. I learned this at a very young age when I was dealing weed out of my house back in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And people would, smoke with me. And even back then, I was pretty bit of a heavyweight, trying to find the good stuff and lucking out on an amazing mentor. And people would get so high that there were multiple times I left my house and they were, sitting in their car, unable to drive, just right out in front of the house kind of thing, and just be like, hey, come back in the house and just chill out by the fish tank for another half an hour and have a juice, and you'll be fine to go. And so that is the beauty about cannabis. Yes, will there be experiences? I'm sure there already have been, where someone's eaten a 5 or a 10, and probably in conjunction with alcohol, and forgotten about it. And that's going to happen. But the bottom line is, those shouldn't be used as excuses to keep higher doses, because people who are eating higher doses and don't get me wrong, I know people who could eat 500 milligrams and absolutely drive to work like no problem. They're affected by it completely different. But most people would not do such a thing. They would say, I am not doing this. In fact, they wouldn't even say anything, because they'd be in a fucking coma. At least I would be on 500 milligrams. What about you, Ted? Are you a 500
I'm
milligram
like you,
guy?
Marcus.
You're like me, 5-10
Yeah,
Yeah,
milligrams.
I
max?
can't take a whole bunch of it. I'm good with 10 or 15 migs. I can take more, but I usually don't need more of that. That's my use case. But I'm like you. I'm pretty sensitive to it, so that's been beneficial to me. Even with tolerance and all that. Anyways.
Have you ever hurt yourself badly and needed it? Because that's where you learn the lesson of how it can affect you. Like, if I really destroy myself, like when I break a collarbone, which is very, very, like, it's sore. It's like a rib. Every time you breathe, it throbs
Yeah.
and moves. It's a floater. It's terrible. Anyway, the
Yeah.
last time I broke it, I used edibles and I didn't get high. And I was eating like 30, 40, 50 milligrams, which is a lot for me. That's like a 5 to 10x on my dosage. And I did not get high. But what I did do is my collarbone stopped throbbing, and it felt amazing. And I thought, you know what? I don't think people can understand how deep the pain is. That's a bone. Imagine the pain that Wade was suffering from at the end of his life, or some of these cancer patients, or some of these people. What you think a 9.5 is like a 3.7 for some of these people. There are levels to pain, like there are to everything. And with cannabis, you can just always go deeper and deeper and deeper. And what I've learned about cannabis is, when you eat enough of it, it allows you to get into a deep enough sleep that you actually heal. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it is a very individual experience. We've learned that genetics play a big factor. Much like alcohol, right? There's certain peoples in the world that have a very low tolerance to alcohol, and other places where, people sort of have a genetic disposition that they can drink a fair amount and still be relatively functional. Cannabis is sort of the same. And then there's also gut health. I have a bacteria overgrowth in my stomach, and cannabis is an antibacterial, which is great in some ways, but I can eat like a 500 milligram gummy, and most of that actually gets absorbed fighting the bacteria in my stomach, and not a lot seems to get into my system. Plus, my tolerance seems high enough that, I can eat a 500 milligram gummy, and some people might not even know I've done that.
Some people's bodies don't really process edibles.
Yeah, isn't that
Some
crazy?
people are almost immune to them.
Yeah.
I agree. Like for me personally, I'll give you, this is my contrast, and this
It's
will
a like
contrast.
documented genetic trait even. It's like they
Yes,
figured
that's
out what it
true.
was. Yeah.
You know, like with Marcus talking about deep bone pain, like for me, I've had like cuts, or like strong, like really cuts into like really large gashes, or once. And then I've had like some bone pain before, not nearly as bad as like hurting your collarbone the way you mentioned, but like for me, I have found that, at least for me, and maybe it's just you haven't taken enough. I don't know. I usually, if I take too much, I have the similar reaction people have when they drink too much. So it doesn't even get to that point for me. Um, and I didn't find that it helps me with the pain. The sensation of the pain was still there. Maybe it was somewhat muted, but what did change for me is that I think it was more tolerant up here. At least I feel like that's the experience I was having. If I were to characterize it, that didn't necessarily go to the pain in the way that like a Vicodin would, or at least here I guess is the what's happening. But you know what I'm trying to say? Like it seemed to it just, I think it worked on different, it does work on different receptors and all that stuff, but to me it was mostly psychological, the benefit, in those large pain points, at least for me. Maybe if I had other injuries or other interactions it'd be different.
Well, thank God we have a medicine like cannabis. I haven't taken pain pills in a very long time, and I've broken 17 bones in my life. So I've been given those pain pills in the past. I'm too sensitive to it. And when you guys say genetic predisposition or whatever, like my theory is that it has to do with how fast or slow you metabolize in your liver. Whatever else is going on, people who metabolize super slow with cannabinoids seemingly are unaffected. They eat like 1,000 milligrams, nothing. If you
That's one of the big
hypermetabolize
yeah.
5 milligrams and you feel all 5 right away instantly, like at peak, well, that's going to feel a lot different than like siphoning out a 0.1 milligram every 3 minutes, or every however long it is. But that's my theory. That's kind
That's
of
a
the
big
thing
way. That's a right way to think about it. That's one of the big
Jeff's right.
factors.
Yeah, yeah, there are people
One
who
of the
just
big
don't
factors, but
have
there are
certain
many different.
enzymes.
There are a few different steps of the absorption, and like the pharmacokinetics can depend on different things, right? You can depend on, that's why it can depend on what's in your stomach and stuff like that too, because that'll also control how fast it gets into your bloodstream. But yeah, right. Then there's the liver functionalization, especially like the most famous functionalization is THC to hydroxy THC. That happens in the liver, I think, right? It's got to
I
be.
believe so.
Yeah.
Nathan,
11 hydroxy metabolite does
Yeah,
produce within the liver.
it's an oxidation, so it must happen there.
It's a strong as fuck Asian is what it is.
Yeah.
and some
So
people don't have the CYP enzymes, certain ones, or they
Right.
have mutations,
yeah, that
and
that really changed their sensitivity to the 11
I'll tell
hydroxy.
you, 11
exactly.
hydroxy is the foundation of all brownie stories. Every brownie story you've ever heard that comes, and we all have them. I swear to God, I really wish Brownie Mary would have written the Brownie Mary brownie cannabis stories, because oh my God, there's so many great cannabis, like Breeder Steve's wedding, 3 people, all doctors going out on all going MDs, all going out on stretchers. I feel like I'm flying, said the Jamaican woman on the stretcher as she was sent to the hospital for eating 2 brownies because they said, "Would you like a brownie, ma'am?" She said, "I'm Jamaican. Give me 2." And then proceeded to wolf down 2 of these brownies. The only person at that wedding who didn't seem to have an interest in the brownies, I find out, is Steve's like uncle or step uncle, and was like a cop, a motorcycle cop. And one time Steve was staying at their house and he put a whole tray of brownies in their freezer. And this cop came home from
Oh
work
no.
and proceeded to finish the entire tray of brownies. So he sat there while the brownies were served at Steve's wedding with the biggest shit-eating grin on his face, just waiting to see who was going to go through what he went through. Because I'll tell you, no matter how old you are, no matter how experienced you are, I don't care if you've had psychedelic experiences, the first time you take a breakthrough dose of cannabis, it is so shockingly eye-opening, and you are so shockingly present for all of it. You just can't escape it forever until it finally ends hours later. Oh, God bless that is what taught me how powerful cannabis was, to be honest. I swear to God, if I gave you enough and you actually metabolized regularly, not the slow, I think I could operate on a person without giving them any anesthetic.
That's why,
Yeah.
that's
It's
why
a
I
deep
love butter
coma.
so much, man.
It's a deep coma, dude.
Yeah.
I went
Butter,
to
butter
a
is
Living
somehow
Soil Summit.
magical
I'll
that
let
way.
you go. Yeah.
Imagine if
Yeah.
your
Oh,
anesthesiologist
that's all
just
I
had
wanted
like
to say.
butter.
Oh,
They were
yeah.
just like scooping butter down your
Yeah,
gullet.
I don't know
You're about
why, but man, like, I don't know why, but every time I make butter and then make baked goods out of it, you're right. Like, but the butter itself too, like, you just get it on your hands because you're squeezing out like the cloth with the weed,
transdermal.
right? And
Yeah.
yeah, like
Wow.
butter is my favorite solvent for extracting cannabinoids.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah, I was gonna say I had an experience like the closest I had to this experience so far because I'm so fastidious about edibles because I'm like you, Marcus. I do not want, I have to be very careful. I went to the Living Soil Summit a few years ago at Green Life Productions, and they had someone had made some like, cupcake maker or like baker had made these little cupcakes for everyone, and someone came out and they said, "Oh, they're all 1 mg." I'm like, oh, cool. I'm always like careful though, and like everyone comes up there getting a bunch. So you know where the story is going. I go and I take two, just two,
100s.
and well, no, fortunately not. But they were fit. But then someone comes back, and go, no, 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 they're 15 migs each. They're 15 migs each. So it's just enough that like I think if if you wanted to have one or 3 migs, now you have
5x.
45 migs, right? And so I had to stare down a hot shower. Didn't get sick or anything, but I was like, all right, time to be here and present, like you're talking about.
Yeah, man, that shit is no joke. I'm gonna wrap it up in about 11 minutes. So I want Ted to and Ted's gonna you'll be coming back on and we'll discuss this more, Ted. But I'd love for you to just let people know how they can you know get plugged into this and follow what you're doing and what's going on and offer support in any way they can and just let people know how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just really kind of getting some wheels in motion for campaigning right now. And so tomorrow I'm having a meeting of a kind of social media committee that starting next week, I'm going to have weekly online kind of Zoom meetings that anybody can join and participate in so I can communicate with as many people as possible on our social media campaign. We need to be sort of hitting on all fronts right now if we want to get our message through about the necessity for storefront access and high dosage edibles. And so so we're doing that. We're engaged in a sort of email writing campaign to our premier David Eby. What we want him to do is simply put a pause on enforcement actions until we've had a judicial review, because we're trying right now to finish our expert reports and everything to press forward to get a court date, because we think the Charter of Rights should be what overrules or everyone considers in this matter more than just what the regulatory laws are. So we just want the premier to do a pause on that. So that's sort of the big goal here. In the meantime, I'm meeting with our mayor this week, and hopefully we'll be getting some support from our city council. We've already gotten some support from the new leader of the BC Green Party, Emily Lohan. But any pressure within the Green Party to support us more broadly would be awesome as well. Doing all sorts of things. If people want to follow me, I guess I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn are my main social media forums that I'm using?
We'll put all those links in the description. If you can send me in Facebook
Awesome. Thank
Messenger
you.
all your details, everything from the everything that you're doing, I'll just copy and paste it right into the description of the video, and then everything you just finished saying now will all be available for clicking or supporting. And listen, you guys, we always talk about this. Etienne is he's like, you got to have action, like get up off your ass and do something. Well, Ted's offering you some actionable items. They're not that big of a deal. Share the social media stuff. First and foremost, go and follow him. I would expect at least, the 200 or 300 people that are watching right now that you could do that. It's not that big of a deal on your end, but it's a really big deal on his end and on our end. So yeah, show your support, do what you can. I know people are always asking for support and then you just ignore them, but don't ignore this. Like, Ted is doing the good work. We need to kind of get behind him and support what he's doing. It's not unreasonable what he's asking for. He has a deep understanding. They've already followed so many things that he's pushed them into corners to do. You'd think at this point in time, they feel like, wow, we shouldn't let this guy make us look like total idiots again. Maybe just thinking of, throwing shit on the wall and seeing what sticks, we could try listening just for once or whatever. Don't have to, I guess, but might be better than looking like a bunch of it just makes you look petty and small. What is the possible reason? I get it, you have some strange political belief system that you're doing the good work and you're protecting children. In the end, you're actually harming children and vulnerable people on a level that is like shameful to the human septoria, the bipedals, the ones we're talking about.
Thank you so much for having me on the show here, Marcus.
Yeah, thank you, Ted, and thank you, Matthew and Jeff for popping in, and Dr. Mark and Colin, who was in here earlier. I'm going to be traveling for the next couple of weeks, but I'll try and get Ted back in maybe towards the last hour so he can kind of, if he has anything more prepared, we can kind of go in on that, particularly actionable items that people can help out with. What else? I think I'm going to go to Blackcomb right now. I think I'm going to jump in my car. How crazy is this? I fly to Michigan today and it's 12 o'clock p.m. It's a later flight, but I'm like, maybe I'll just go to Whistler for the day and do some snowboarding and enjoy time with my wife. Don't forget to feed your soul. It is the thing that keeps us all going, whether you believe it or not. If you feel depressed or sad or empty, you're probably filling the wrong hole, the black hole that can never be filled. Don't fill that one. One more thing cannabis is amazing at, getting us to find the right thing to fill, which is your soul. Enjoy life, enjoy music, enjoy food, enjoy friends, enjoy family. Thank you all for watching. Honestly, like, I just can't express my gratitude and gratefulness for the panelists that come on Sunday after Sunday, the people who come and watch, our sponsors, Puffco and the Press Club and Grandmaster and Bubble Bags. Thank you is all I can say. Be more grateful and you'll feel grateful. Be more critical and you'll feel pretty critical and pissed off.
Pretty cool and awesome.
That's the term.
Right, Marcus?
Pretty cool and awesome. All right. Love you guys all. Much love. Have a great rest of your day. May the full melt bless your bowl sooner than later. Peace.
Have a great one.
Much love.
Thanks. Great.